Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. This is the City of Aspen City Council regular meeting for June 20th, 2023. It's actually, we're coming back. We opened the session, we went into executive session, and we are back. Can we have a roll call for attendance?
Councillor Doyle?
Here.
Councillor Guth?
Here.
Councillor Howenstein?
Present.
Councillor Rose?
Here.
Mayor Tory?
Here. We have citizens' comments and petitions. If there's members of the public that would like to speak this evening on items not scheduled for a public hearing on our agenda, please do so. We ask that you keep your comments limited to about 3 minutes so everybody has a fair and equal opportunity to speak. Are there members of the public that wish to speak this evening in room? Come on up.
Hi, Susan Barber, and I totally have nothing prepared, but because I know you had a session about Centennial, I only heard about it this afternoon, but I have was on the board for many years and have lived there for something like 21 years. I am just so frustrated that a solution cannot be found to this simple problem. I mean, when we came to the board, I think it's about 13 years ago, the city council directed city staff to find a solution. Unfortunately, it was Barry Crook and Steve Barwick, who Barry could come up with any solution as long as the existing homeowners paid something like $40,000 at the time, and it would never be put on the resale price. You're looking at spending $400 million for some mess out at the lumber yard that's going to be more traffic on 82, everything else. You can't find a way to save something that is already owned by the city. We're like prostitutes. We get to live in your hotel as long as we work. You sell it, you determine who buys it, you determine the price, everything about it. It's to your advantage to keep it in a good place. We were given a bad product. We've done the best we can with it. And I don't see how you can just talk about spending millions, hundreds of millions, when you can't find a solution to this problem. Otherwise, you're going to end up with units that will not be up to APCHA standards. There are people, 92 families maybe, so 150 people that are working, are part of the community, that have put a lot into this, and not just some imaginary thing out on 82 that you're going to end up with people that only want to be workers that aren't going to be part of the community, because really, who wants to live on a highway? I mean, so I really think it's to the advantage of the city and for everyone to find a solution and take care of this before they fall down. Thank you.
Thank you. Other public comment this evening? Rachel?
Hi, guys. Thank you so much for your time. My name is Rachel Richards. I've lived in Aspen essentially since 1978. Didn't come to talk about Centennial, but please know Hunter Creek has the exact same claims. There was no public money put into it. It's just workers. It was cheaply built for rental housing, and we've put millions and millions in repairs so far. So we're looking forward to a similar solution for other HOAs as well. What I'm here to talk about is workers, and I agree with some of the sentiment I heard put forward. Workers have begun to be talked about as if you just order another couple dozen from Amazon, they show up on your doorstep, they're all trained, and they're happy to go back into their box at night. There's no real consideration of their needs and their desires as they serve our community, serve our economy, serve our guests, because their needs are the same as yours. They want stability. They don't want to face eviction or not renewing your lease every year, because now you're making too much money. You're not making enough money. They want security. They want to know they're going to develop some equity with their time, with their life, with their best working years. They want to know what their future holds. And if we only want folks for a few party years, that's one thing. But if you want to consider the life cycle of professionals, and this town is full of professionals, you have to consider their full set of needs. And that might be 2 parking spaces for a 3-bedroom or a 2-bedroom, because maybe it's going to be an electrician who has a work truck, or a construction worker, or a plumber. Some of the people we'd really like to have back up in the Upper Valley, and they need a personal car for their spouse. You know, let's not treat workers as if we really only want them here for a couple years and give them the minimum that they need to be here. We want a community, is always my thought. And I think it's important when we talk about no retirement, none of those old people, not in the future. Would we have kicked Bob Broadus out after he gave all his time to our community, told him he couldn't rent at Truscott? I don't think so. But it's sending a message to your workers today that the rules are changing, the ground rules are changing, and this council is on the verge of wanting to change those things for a variety of reasons. and it's sending a big message to workers today about what their future is here. Secondly, I was going to talk about how we do treat workers, and we ask them all to ride the bus. We ask them to ride the bus from Burlingame, from Castle Maroon, from Aspen Snowmass, from Cemetery Lane, from the Valley Local, from the Valley BRT. Thousands and thousands of people come into our town to work without a car every day. I'd like to know if the third reversible lane in either direction is going to be a priority for those people, for our mass transit system, which every resident in this valley pays property taxes into now for the BRT. Every resident in this valley pays sales taxes at their grocery store. And I want to know that your Castle Creek Bridge solution is not about how do we bring more SOVs and construction vehicles and dump trucks and people who are running their kids to and from school or wherever over the mass transit workers who've made the effort to catch a bus schedule, to leave their car in a park and ride lot, to stand in the cold and the snow and wait for their next bus to show up, that they're getting the same priority with your entrance discussions as are the SOVs and the people who do not want their view plane of the Merle property disturbed. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Rachel. Other members of the public that wish to speak tonight? Come on. That's quite all right. We don't either.
Nice to see you all. Look like you had a good weekend, got some tan, some color. Anyway, I am Mary Barber, and I live, gosh, for the last 35 years. I've lived here 38 almost, but at Centennial. And I love it there, and I don't know what else to say except for you've heard a lot of what's going on, and we really need your help. So please listen to us. I lived here, lived there with my husband who passed away 15 years ago, and I don't know, I just feel like we're being abandoned. And I'm sorry to get emotional, but it's a place I'm gonna retire, and I feel like it's so important for all of us people who have worked hard and want to live in a safe and healthy place, you know? And I don't know if any of the people who have lived in Centennial, if any of the things going on in the soil or anything around there gave anyone cancer, but it's just something to look, we need help and we need to go deep into it, and please just listen to the people who are reaching out to you that have lived here for so long and want to be a part of this community, and I love it here, so thank you
Ask
for
you a
listening.
question.
Yeah.
Could you describe, I don't know which unit you live in Centennial, I think, but could you describe what, in your particular, your singular case, what's going on with your unit?
Well, I had let's see, Anderson Window came 2.5 years ago. I had new windows put in, and the guys from Denver said, I think this place should be condemned. They couldn't believe that they were out there working on my slider and my windows, and they just were blown away at how it was constructed. And a couple of them said something to me about the construction at the beginning of when they were built. And I was, you know, so that was interesting to hear. I've also had the bugs, the little brown and white bugs that have come and gone because of what's in the walls. And I noticed too, my beautiful deck that I've redone like 3 times, and just because of the rains, the paint that's peeling off and falling all over my entire deck and my flowers, and it's just discouraging. And it's a beautiful view. I love living in this valley, and I plan on retiring here and hope that some things can be done. I don't know if we've had someone check on mold issues or anything like that, but you know, J.E. DeVilbus used to live down below me, and Reggie, my husband, I don't know, Ed Cross. I'm not going into the whole, like, people got cancer because of it or anything, but it's just, it's a huge thing to look at, and I hope and pray you guys will listen to us and help us out if you possibly can.
Thank you, that helps.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
My name is Julia Forsay, and I've been a resident at Centennial for 38 years. I've worked in the ski industry since my arrival in 1976. I was employed at Aspen Ski Tours, Ski.com for 37 years. During that time, I sold thousands of room nights, lift tickets, airline tickets. It was a demanding and fast-paced job. I retired in 2020, and I deserve it. I also deserve to reside at Centennial for the rest of my days. Unhappily, this may not be possible if we aren't unable to find a solution. So I'm just asking you to please think about it and work with us, talk to us.
Thank you. And I'd like to ask you the same question. If you don't mind sharing, would you just let us know what are some of the problems that you've encountered in the unit that you're in?
Well, a number of years ago, they did remediate the south side of my unit. When they got in behind the wall, you could literally pick the wood out of the studs. It was just soft. It was just crumbled. So they remediated me, and what they found out, the guy said, "Lady, do you know you have no insulation in here?" And I thought my bedroom was cold. They didn't put insulation in the south side of my unit. And I've got crumbling concrete on the north side, and I see the one wall next to my cement slab is just deteriorating, and I'm thinking that the water's coming down and going over and into this little corner, and so the concrete is all trashed. And then I had a hot water heater come down on me, which is pretty normal. And when they took the ceiling out, they looked and they said, "Do you know there's mold in here?" And I said, "I don't know." He said, "Well, it's sort of old mold." They said, "What do you want us to do?" And they just covered it up, and we just kept on going. So it's, you know.
A little of everything.
A little bit of everything. And of course, I mean, the interior of the units were very shoddily done too. I've replaced the kitchen, I've replaced the bathrooms, I've replaced everything. And every contractor that came in would say to me, "Well, lady, I don't even think this is code." I mean, I got that response many times. So it's just everything.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. I appreciate it. This is another call for public comment this evening. If there's members of the public who wish to comment on anything not scheduled for a public hearing this evening. And I'd be looking online, but I'm not online. So I don't see if there are. With their hand raised?
No,
Okay, thank you.
I don't see it.
All right, I'll make another call for members of the public who want to make public comment this evening. If you are online and you did want to make public comment, unmute yourself, introduce yourself, please. Hearing none, we'll bring it back to council table. Council member comments this evening? We'll start with Bill.
Thank you. I've been talking with Michael Goldberg, who's in the room here, about the Palm Tree Festival that they launched last year, or this year, I'm sorry, earlier this year. And I would like to see if there's support. First of all, I can commend them on just a really incredibly executed event, a novel event for Aspen. I thought it was done super well and went off without a hitch from my perspective. I wanted to see if there's support for allowing staff to approve the renewal of that event for early '24. I don't remember the specific date, at an administrative level for next year.
Thank you for that. I would like to, let's handle that. Let's do council member comments and let's get into that discussion.
Sure.
I appreciate it. Do you have any other items this evening?
I think that's it. Thanks.
Okay, we'll come right back to that in a moment. Sam, do you care to go?
Yeah, I got three things. One, Unfortunately, it doesn't sound like there's going to be fireworks on the 4th of July because that's something that needs to be procured in January. So something to think about for future years. If we want fireworks again on the 4th of July, I know I do. Another thing coming up is the Aspen Community Pride event, which the city is a co-sponsor on at the Music Tent, which is Thursday, June 29th from 4 to 6. And then on Bill's note of asking for support on something, I'm looking to potentially have a work session on the Wheeler Rhett Arts and Culture grants, hoping for better utilization, just to hear about those and how they could be utilized potentially more fully. And I'll leave it as vague as that, because I just think it's something that I've heard a lot about from different groups of people, and I'd love to discuss if there's potentially an increase in the grant amounts that could be given, or what could be done to utilize them just better, so.
All right. A request for a work session would require some support from 3 council members to schedule that. We have, we'll just share with, I'm not interested in scheduling this for a work session right now. We have opportunity through our calendar and through our budget process to discuss this. But I don't, you left it as vague as you left it, so I don't know why or what. So at this time, I'm not supportive of scheduling a special work session.
Well, I guess I could be more specific that, and Sarah, I'm looking towards you if you can help me with this, as far as we talked a little bit about what the numbers are as far as the cap on each arts and culture grant and the overall incoming amount to that arts and culture fund. And I feel like the cap on the grants and the amount being given out right now is well below what could be.
The direction from City Council is $100,000, the maximum award that any grantee could receive. And that is the cap he is referring to. And then the current amount of, I believe the Arts and Culture Grants Fund is at $850,000 per year. That is being available in the grant pool for the 3 different grant programs that have been authorized by council. One is operating, one supports artists, and the other is for capital equipment.
And the money coming into that fund is much greater than the $850,000. I feel like it could just be utilized potentially better or more efficiently, and that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Once again, I'm not going to support a special work session on this, but I think that there's plenty of opportunity in our budget talks and when this comes back. For me, I think I remember when our grant funding was somewhere around 400,000. And some of the changes that we've made recently have sought to pursue kind of the path that you're talking about. But we just got the RET language passed. We just upped the grant availability as well as the cap. So we're kind of on that path. But again, I don't know how other council members feel. I'm just saying that I think there's a great opportunity for that discussion without scheduling it for its own work session at this time. And I don't know if Sarah, we just had a grant update from our team recently. Are we scheduled for them to come back to us prior to next year?
No. And to clarify, it's $810,000, not $850,000. I just looked it up. That is being awarded, and it was awarded. That is scheduled for award this year. I think all those checks have gone out.
I'm supportive of having that conversation.
I think we've had a big upgrade in the grants process. We had one part of a year for new proceeds going into the Wheeler Red Fund that are available for grants. I don't want to go through it again until we get into budget, because we will have plenty of time to go through this in the budget process. So I don't support a separate work session at this time, because it will be coming up soon.
I also feel like we spent time on allotting grants and setting the limits already. I'm happy to look at it during budget season, but at this point, I think we have enough on our plates.
Appreciate that. For clarity on process, when I just make sure I requested the right thing, You said special work session. I'm like adding an agenda item to a work session. Same
Yeah.
difference to you?
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Okay.
Is just a specific work session on this topic. You're gonna have your chance during budget season.
Okay.
The grants for this year have already gone out, but we will be talking about this prior to the next round. So if there were changes that this council wanted to see, staff and our team would be happy to implement. So-
Okay.
So we'll have that conversation.
Sounds good.
Any other comments this evening? I'll head on down, John?
I have some. Some environmental news. June temperatures briefly passed a key climate threshold, and scientists are expecting more spikes. Worldwide temperatures briefly exceeded a key warming threshold earlier this month, a hint of heat and its harms to come. Also, in recent news today, Switzerland, as Switzerland's glaciers melt, the Alpine nation backed a climate bill with net zero target for 2050. 59% of voters were in favor of the bill, sparked by a campaign by scientists and environmentalists to save Switzerland's iconic glaciers, which have lost a tremendous amount of ice in the last several years, as well as glaciers in the Himalayas are also similarly threatened. Himalayan glaciers could lose 80% of their volume if global warming not controlled. This affects the lives of 2 billion people who live downstream. Water continues to be a huge issue around the world. Some good news, though. This is from Massachusetts Institute of Technology. The world saw a $2.8 trillion worth of investments in energy in 2022, and 1.7 trillion of that went to clean energy, which is the first time the world has spent more on clean energy than on oil. Little good news at the end, thanks.
Thanks, John. Ward, comments this evening?
Yeah, my only comment is that today was the opening of a new exhibit at the Resnick Center on Herbert Bayer's Atlas. It takes more than one session to go through the whole thing. It's amazing, and I highly recommend everybody get out there. They're going to start doing tours, guided tours, I think July 7th, but Herbert Bayer was an amazing fellow, and everybody should go take a look at it. It's free, and it's at the Resnick Center, adjacent to the music festival at the Aspen campus of Aspen Meadows.
You compel me to just say a word. I got a look at the atlas that he created, and it is an amazing piece of art, but informative, I mean, it's amazing. This exhibit is really, truly special. I appreciate you bringing that up. It is great. It is great. Any other comments this evening? No. I have one comment tonight. I always like to make people aware of things that are more fun than being here. Tonight at the Wheeler Opera House is a wildfire program put on by our AFD and AVFD, and that's at 7:30 tonight. So if anybody's interested in getting together with community members, not just talking about wildfire, but also about natural impacts and natural cause and effect. So that should be great at the Wheeler, 7:30 this evening. That's all my comments. So we're going to come back to our Sarah needs direction on the Palm Tree Festival moving forward. Bill is putting it on the table to start the process of administratively approving and going forward with what it takes to get it done for this next year, 2024. And I appreciate that, and I appreciate the time frame there. So right now, besides just support or non-support, if there's any comments or input that you would like on the record, now is a good opportunity for that. Ward?
Yeah, I supported administrative approval. I think that the process went very well last night, or last year. Was it this year?
It was this year.
But I think it went well. There were some complaints about cleanup at the end, which can be addressed, I think. So I would support an administrative approval of this.
Thanks. John?
I'll support administrative approval as well.
Sam?
I'm supportive of administrative approval as well.
All right. I have a couple comments that I want to make before I also lend my support. One, I agree that we want to try it again in 2024. I don't want to extend it in perpetuity, but 2024 I do agree with. I did have a chance to talk to Michael Goldberg and share my opinions and my feelings about it. I felt that the hours of it were too long. I think the first act started at 4:30 in the afternoon. It finished at 10 o'clock at night. That's kind of the festival model. I don't really think that a festival model is the best model down there. I would rather see shortened hours from it. I'm all for a concert, and I'm just speaking to you directly. I'm all for a concert. I think it's great. I thought that what that was as a package was just a little much for me. And not just me, I mean my community. I also, I know we did decibel meter readings, but the way that the sound boxed in down there in the bowl that Rio Grande Park is, there were definitely higher decibel readings than are truly allowed. I don't care about that, but what I do care about is the impact that can have. So I just want to be on the record as saying I do support it going forward for another year, but I think it could be done better. My other concern here is about scheduling. Potentially, this lines up so that there could be a World Cup, a Palm Tree Festival, an X Games, a Winter Skull. So it could go from us wanting some vibrancy, entertainment, and the like, to being really overdone in those few weeks because it's all the same scheduling. So with that, I mean, I support it, trying it again, but I think that it could be done better. And I know that Michael shared that he's like, hey, we're going to make it the best we can, and we'll take care of anything that is in our power to do so. So I think it'll be even better than it was last year. I do support it for next year, for administrative approvals going forward.
I have one additional comment on feedback that I received from members of the community. I live above it, up at the base of Smuggler, and I hardly heard it at all, but I have heard from other people, Tori included, in West End, that the sound was more of an impact there than up behind it. So if there's anything that can be done to mitigate the sound propagation to the West End, to please look into that as well.
And this isn't a complaint, this is just a statement of fact, but I could hear the lyrics in the West End, and I heard from a friend of mine who lives in Brush Creek Village that he could hear it in Brush Creek Village. So, again, I like the music, I really enjoyed the artists, but that's how loud the music was.
All right.
I think they also deserve to be commended. I know you all know this, but they're putting on a free concert on July 4th as part of this package, which is I'm looking forward to, and I think goes above and beyond and demonstrates their commitment to the community.
That was part of our agreement with them.
Yep.
So it would be helpful to have a motion, and if it addresses any noise requirements, the limit is 100 decibels. They stayed within that for the festival last year, which is higher than what the noise ordinance allows. And then secondly, if there's conditions such as the community-free concert, please include that in the motion.
I'll move that we have a resolution in support of administrative approval of the Palm Tree Festival with conditions that the decibel levels remain within what the code is.
That would lower them.
That is not possible
that'd
probably
lower
for
it.
this event.
The code is like 90, this is at 100.
I'm asking that they,
Stay within 90, within the
within the existing code. That would mean that it has to be lower than it was. If it was exceeding at 100 and the code is 90, that I would want it to be at or below the code.
All right, I just need to verify what the code decibel is. I don't recall it off the top of my head.
I don't recall. We can try to look it up.
And that it also include a free festival for the community.
All right, before we weigh in on that, we need to check that because the language in your motion restricts it to the code. And the truth is, I think the code actually well, depending, I don't know if there's a separate section for event, but the code for businesses would be 65 at property line.
I was thinking it was lower like that.
It is. It's like 65 at property line.
See, yeah, the special event
If there's no
provisions.
second on the motion, I suppose it's a moot issue, what the code says, right?
I'm sorry?
If there's no second on that particular
Yeah,
motion.
yeah, it's okay.
It's a moot
It's
issue.
okay. Yeah. But we just want to,
We could-
and Ward, just let me make a suggestion to the motioner here. I mean,
We could bring some back at
I
at
guess
the next meeting.
I guess approval, if they did, I mean, the truth is, if they were at 100 decibels at their perimeter, as it's written, it would be okay. And I'm saying that from a sound engineer's point of view. It's not necessarily that 100 was too much. 65 is way too low to do a show or a concert like this. But 100 isn't. It's not the fact that 100 was too much. It's that it was more than 100 in certain places. That's the issue. So if they actually do maintain 100, it probably is okay. I don't know where 100 came from.
You have to look at this under the,
Oh, so
The
it's
code is
9,
pretty specific that it's up to 100 decibels under a special event permit until 9 PM.
9 p.m.
And it's a waiver after 9 PM for maintaining that 100 decibel level. The residential zone decibel limits are 55 during the day and 50 in the evening and overnight.
And the evening is defined by 9 PM?
I think it's
9
9
PM.
PM is the switch from 55 to 50. I would suggest that's too low for this event, to require the adherence to the residential noise limits for these kinds of acts.
So it would be by code 100. The variance here is to continue the 100 until 10 p.m. I think it ran to 10 p.m. So. That's what we had last year. Right. So, Ward, if you would, if you'll withdraw and make a new motion, your new motion would say something to the effect of giving the city manager the approval or direction to do administrative approvals for a 2024 Palm Tree Festival, or actually, I mean, I wouldn't even say, I would just say Belly Up Production, if you don't mind.
Tori, you're doing a good job.
Yeah, I'm halfway there, aren't I? I would make a motion to, by the city council, to give the city manager authorization for administrative approvals of a palm tree, a belly up production and concert in the park, that adheres to the 100 decibel limit for the duration of their event, hours till 10 p.m. I'm not going to put a start time on it because I hope you guys will do some good stuff there. Is there anything else that you wanted included in that?
Are you
Free concert?
the concert?
Yes, with a similar requirement of a community benefit or free community part of the production.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Does it seem necessary to require the free concert, given that you can stand on the balcony here and watch any of the acts that they brought in and people are paying for, almost with the same experience? Do we really need to require them to do a separate event.
We don't-
And I don't know how happy they are to do, I haven't discussed that specifically with them, but it just seems like an unnecessary burden to me for something that is a really great event.
We don't need to, but I guess some of the value and ethic that councils have brought forward to now were that this is public space. They would be taking it over for private profit. So it's just been something that we've always looked for, is that, you know, there's community benefit to events like this.
Right. To be clear, though, they did pay $33,660 to use the property, so it's not as if it's being donated.
Right,
Sure.
and that covers
Sure.
the staff labor associated with the preparation and of the space, oversight, inspections. It's not a profit line for the city. This is labor costs associated with ensuring the event is safely constructed and within the code.
Bill, are you offering an amendment, asking for an amendment to
Well,
remove?
I wanted to discuss it first, but, you know, if I don't have other support on that, obviously I want to support this event. I wanted to see what everyone's sentiment was.
Well, and they can get creative with it. You know, last year they had an early ticket deal that people could take part of as locals. But beyond that, again, like I say, I mean, it's a public park. I get that people can stand up on the railing. I don't mind leaving it open-ended. They can discuss it. They can talk, you know, about what the extent of that means. But yeah, I do think that. Anyway, yes, it seemed to work out great last year. We'll see. You know, we haven't even gotten that yet from
That's
last
right.
year.
Yep.
So, you know, they can discuss that. Sarah will have the ability for approvals at another time. I don't hear anybody else seconding Bill's suggestion of removals.
Well, I was just wondering if either Michael or David, if you wanted to speak to the free event or not. If you don't, sorry to call you out, but if you want.
You'd have to come up to the table.
State my name, right?
Please.
Done this once. David Goldberg, Belly Up. Speaking to the free event, as you can recall, this evolved over a period of time. Originally, we were talking about summer. We were talking about coming out of COVID. The concept of a free event came up in the context of doing something for the community, coming out of COVID, doing it in the summer. Originally, once it moved to winter, COVID had passed, I guess. We weren't just coming out of it. The context of doing a free event with that, council, staff, us included, felt putting that on to a concert in the winter on the snow didn't make sense anymore. That's why it got removed and splintered off to being its isolated July 4th now concert that we're doing. That being said, as you alluded to, Tori, we do plan on doing the Roaring Fork Valley tickets again. We think we found a good process with that. We can certainly tighten that up. We did 2 ticket limit on that. We would probably narrow that down to 1 because we found some people were buying tickets for people that had friends in Denver, et cetera. But doing it on its own without the infrastructure that we originally planned to piggyback off of, it's not cheap. It's labor intensive. It comes with a lot of things to just put an isolated stage in the middle of town on July 4th. It's something that we're happy to do, and it was part of the bargain and 100% something that we're going to do, but it's not what it was originally intended for and discussed as when we first came up with using the infrastructure that was already going to be in place for Palm Tree itself. Hopefully that helps answer the question some.
Appreciate it. You know, like I said, I give them the ability to work out what that looks like. It doesn't have to be a 4th of July. We did not plan on it being 4th of July. It was really just going to be a 3rd day, but I agree with you that it was probably not, it's probably a better idea the way you're doing it now. But I'll just say, I mean, without a community component like that, I'm not compelled to give the community the impacts without anything. I mean, I'm all for music. Worked in the business for years. Love it. But the people that I represent, make decisions for, I mean, why would they care? I mean, you know?
So could they have the leeway to use the Palm Tree infrastructure and perhaps do something earlier in the day that was free and open to the public, or the following day or the previous day to the festival? Could they have that kind of leeway to work that out with staff? doesn't need to be July 4th specifically, doesn't need to be a separate event. Is that
That certainly
better?
lessens the burden, I would say, because when you have to do this, you have to start from scratch, right? So what we're doing on July 4th, while it's very different, it's still building a stage to join into the 4th of July festivities, and it's still bringing in crew to do that. It's bringing in a band for that. It's bringing in infrastructure, security, et cetera. It's not as easy as just pressing go as it would be if the infrastructure was already in place. Now, what that looks like, I don't know. I have to dive into it, but it certainly makes it make a lot more sense.
Great.
And what it was originally discussed as, but also, as you remember, Tori, that was prior to the discussion of Roaring Fork. So I'm with you in support of that completely. I want to make sure that it's not, it checks the boxes of making sure that there is community involvement as well. And absolutely plan on going down the road with Roaring Fork tickets again and going down that path. That seemed to work out better than an isolated concert on its own. We're obviously doing both.
No.
But, well, we'll see. We'll see in a few
We
weeks.
haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, of course. And
You know, just let me, so what I'm saying is like, I don't expect a 4th of July concert from you. I expect that you could partner in, you know, you don't have to carry all the water.
Yeah.
So there's different ways to skin this cat. I just think that it's important for our community to be recognized and have benefit. I mean, otherwise, this is really just a profit opportunity for you. And this is a public park. So to me, that's always been a part of kind of my support for saying, yeah, you can use public property, go right ahead. You know, it's akin to this. We allow World Cup to do a concert and a community thing out in Wagner Park because it's free and open to the public. It's community gathering, it's supportive of winter sports and that kind of activity. We allowed even the X Games to do a concert out in Wagner Park because it was free and open to the community. So along with that ethic, you know, it's kind of the same thing for me. And, you know, I'm only sitting here for 2 more years, so it's not forever.
No, understood completely.
But right now, the people that I represent in the community, they are like, why? Why do we do this park impacts? Why do we have the traffic impacts? Why do we have the noise impacts? Why? And to me, the answer is, well, guess what? 4th of July, you're going to have the best 4th of July you ever had because Belly Up's going to be putting on this concert. And they go, huh, all right, well, maybe that feels a little better. So anyway, for me, the support is with some sort of community component. Again, I don't expect you to put on a whole 4th of July concert. I agree. You probably are biting off a little more this year than you wanted to or need to. But I think there's partnership opportunities for you. I mean, we could use your expertise in a bunch of things. You guys have helped you've helped the city of Aspen in years past, booking acts and the like. So I think there's a way for you to do it without, you know, being overburdened with it.
Your Honor, I think that the applicant is agreeing that a community element to this event is in order, a willingness to work with the city. I trust a trusted partner to work with the city to come up with an acceptable and exceptionally fine public element to this. So I leave that up to negotiations between you and city manager or appointed staff.
Yeah, as long as your motion has that leeway in it, and I don't recall your exact words, but I think it does.
Let the record reflect that, absolutely.
Yeah, as long as, I'm totally happy to support that motion.
Yeah. All right. We have a motion and a second. Could we have a roll call vote for the motion?
Counselor Doyle?
Yes.
Counselor Guth?
Yes.
Counselor Howenstein?
Yes.
Counselor Rose?
Yes.
Mayor Tory?
I'm a yes.
Thank you all, appreciate it.
Thank you.
See you on the 4th. See you on the 4th.
Who's playing?
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Who's playing?
It's a secret, right? I don't know.
It should be at this point, but not for long. All right, that will end Councilmember and Mayor's comments. Any agenda amendments this evening?
Yes, we continued the executive session to after the action items that are set forth.
Thank you. City Manager's comments tonight?
I have a few things for you. First, as soon as I said the wrong number on the record, I had plenty of staff let me know I had it wrong. So just to clarify on the arts and cultures grants, $810,000 was the new money, the increased money being put in. The total grant pool is $1,210,000. each year coming out of that fund. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear in the record. The traditional program support grant is $900,000. The capital equipment acquisition grant pool is $250,000, and the artist fellowships are $60,000. Okay. A couple other things for you real quick. I just want to give a shout out to our staff who worked tirelessly behind the scenes with volunteers and food and wine representatives to deliver an exceptional event to the community, particularly in some challenging weather conditions. So kudos to all of them for their hard work. One of the things I was excited about this year was seeing the partnership between Colorado Mountain College and Food and Wine Classic grow, and seeing our own CMC students from the Aspen community right up there with top chefs doing prep work, helping behind the scenes to make the event go flawlessly. So just another way of leveraging our local assets into these community celebrations and special events. I also wanted to let you know for the July 18th joint meeting with the BOCC. Again, this starts, I believe, at 10 a.m. over at the Aspen Institute. I just needed to confirm if anyone will be virtual for that meeting, or if you all, those who are attending will be in person. I just don't want to incur the additional AV cost if we don't need to, if everyone's showing up in person. Please let me know if you're not. I have from one of you who has a conflict who won't be there, no problem. We have you down as a no for the day. Okay, and then for that event, I'm really excited. Stephanie Zaza has agreed to come back and facilitate. So a few of you have been in facilitation sessions with Stephanie in the past, and I find her to be a very effective facilitator with elected officials. She's a resident of our valley, and we will get you a bio on her if you would like. But the backstory is after a well-accomplished career in the CDC, she came here to retire, and we just keep pulling her back in to do some work. And she's a great contributor to our valley. And then lastly, as we move forward with council's goals this evening, I just wanted to bring to your attention an open house for a possible bike trail pedestrian connection from the Brush Creek Park and Ride to the AABC. This has been a long-listed trail connection for the city of Aspen's mobility goals to see this trail go forward. And that open house is tomorrow night from 5:30 to 7 p.m. at the at CMC in that large room right there on the first floor towards the Pottery Studio. I did send you each I did send each of you the announcement on this project, and I would suggest that the council members become educated about it and consider whether giving direction to provide any comments from the city council to the BOCC on this project. That's it for me.
Thank you, Sarah. Sarah, I need to go back to my comments because I had a question for you. We received an email today, and it's on a topic that I've been talking with you about, which was some bicycle parking and some other mobility parking, some other mode parking downtown. And I didn't recall from our last conversation whether or not you wanted to have some council direction on, I think we were talking most specifically about additional bike racks in parking spots and stuff.
Right. In the past, the council has wanted to be directive about the removal of parking spaces for any use other than what's provided in the construction mitigation plans. And so if you wish us to remove additional vehicle parking to increase bicycle or scooter parking in the core, we just need to get a sense of how many spots you're willing to make that transition with, and staff will go around and make some thoughts on where those should go. But inevitably, this upsets merchants anytime council takes this action, and why we no longer do it administratively.
Yep. Are we still planning on putting in the dedicated motorcycle and moped scooter parking at the ends of blocks, not losing parking spaces, but at the ends of blocks?
Yes, that'll continue as currently programmed. This spring, we made a decision to focus on ensuring the striping for the crosswalks was the first priority over striping of parking spaces. The weather has been less than ideal for painting. And so you can see we've had a delay in the restriping of the parking spaces. But when that restriping of parking spaces, which will be coming up, it will include marking of motorcycle parking zones again.
I appreciate it. So to council members, I would just say, maybe over the next 2 weeks, actually, we're probably not scheduled to be back here, but just over the next weeks, if you'll just look, keep your eyes peeled downtown and the like for bike parking, and perhaps or perhaps not, we'll come back and discuss whether there's an appropriate place where a parking spot needs to be turned into bike parking or something like that. But I'm not gonna do it tonight, but if you just keep your eyes open, that'd be great.
Brief question. When is the artwork in front of the Wheeler going to be installed?
Kicks
On the-
off
on
on
the street.
Sunday. Yes, let's be clear, it's on the street right at the curve next to the dancing fountain. There is a pop-up and community engagement event this Sunday. I apologize, I gotta pull the times, I don't remember. The entire community is invited to come down, though, help paint the design from one of our Roaring Fork artists in that area to provide increased pedestrian awareness for motor vehicles as they traverse that area. There'll also be an opportunity for folks to provide input to the city's public art plan that's under development.
Thank you.
This is an opportunity for board reports. We actually did our board reports at last evening's work session. As part of our work session once a month, we do that, so no new board reports this evening. That brings us to the consent calendar. Consent calendar this evening is resolution number 86. It's a change order for Gilbert Sanchez Architect for design and construction administration services. We have resolution number 87, which is add service for Concept 1 Group for construction management as advisor services. We have resolution number 89, a contract for the Wheeler LED lighting package, and resolution number 93, a change order for excavation services. Does anybody want any of these pulled for further discussion?
Yes, please, 86, 87, 93.
86, 87, 93. 86, 87,
93.
93. We'll do 86 and 87, because those are kind of related,
Yeah,
right?
particularly my comments are
Yep,
related.
sounds great.
You want me to start?
93.
Resolution 83.
If it was in here, I would be glad to. I don't see it. I got 93.
Yeah, there's.
I got a consent calendar 83, Series 20, Construction Management and Advisor, CMA.
I get it. You have it in the same place that I have it as.
This agenda was updated multiple times in the last few days. I think Ward may have.
Yeah, it sounds like you have an earlier version. There were two resolutions.
Old 83.
Yeah, there were two resolutions that were on the agenda when it was first published that were pulled off in an amendment.
Okay, so I want a discussion on whatever number that is now.
It's not on the calendar.
It's not on the calendar. Never mind.
I know what you're asking about, though, yes. Okay, go ahead, Bill.
Okay, so this is a bit of a philosophical discussion, but I know the last council approved an all-office use for the Old Powerhouse. And I wanted to revisit that conversation a little bit. I think that there is an opportunity, I know there is an opportunity at the Mill Building across the street from this building to purchase about 4,000 square feet of office space that could satisfy many of the office space needs and free up what I think could be an irreplaceable opportunity for a community use in addition to the Armory. So I wanted to see if there was any other interest in exploring that and holding off on these quite expensive ad services to move forward with the exclusively office use at the Old Powerhouse, which to me seems like an inappropriate place for office.
Do you know the offering or asking price?
I do, it's $4 million.
$4 million. Okay. And then let me ask a quick question. Do you guys mind introducing yourselves for the record?
I'm Evan Pletcher, Project Manager, Capital Asset.
Rob Schober, Capital Asset Director.
And of the contracts that are in front of us, or of the work that is being started, yes, right now, end goal, and you did see that, like, we did look at the Powerhouse for the opportunity to not do all office.
I did.
And that came forward both from council desire, but also, staff's best efforts for as much community space as possible. Of the work, of these contracts and of the work that goes forward, how much is it specific to making it office space versus getting the building ready and getting it to be, it could be anything, right? I mean, offices on the ground floor, I assume, are going to be made with partition walls and stuff, the like, that are not necessarily permanent in a lot of. Anyway, my point is of the contracts that we're looking at, it doesn't preclude them. It could be a different use if we even wanted to look into this. But the work that we're doing down there, we'd want to do anyway for the building, even if it moved to a community use. Could you speak to that in some way?
Correct. So a lot of what we're doing is restoring the building in its historic nature. It's due for a major exterior overhaul. However, our direction was to program for office space, but we are intending to kind of put the infrastructure in place and the layout is in place so that if the direction changed for the facility at some point, we could convert it to a public space or partially a public space. That is our intent.
For clarity, though, Council, is that you are incurring costs with these contracts for preparation of a application to the Historic Preservation Commission, which includes the addition of a second dormer on the second floor, which may not be costs that need to be incurred if this was not office space.
Yeah, probably not necessary, but I personally, from what I've seen, I think it's an improvement, and I mean, not on many levels, to be quite honest. So even if it were to change uses, I think that the second dormers would be really great. So anyway, council members, you have an ask here, or he's pulling this to say, hey, should we not move forward with these contracts at this time and look at other opportunities for purchasing office space? One example is Mill Street, and there might be others. Anyway, any conversation here?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I think the reason that the previous council gave towards using that as office space instead of community use, primarily as office space, is so we wouldn't have to pay rent. Now, granted, your suggestion is to buy more office space, but that's where we were coming from, was trying to keep city offices in city-owned buildings. I'm happy with this going forward if there is flexibility involved, which I hear there is.
Any additional comments or questions?
Oh, and I think it's important to keep these buildings on track because, again, this is a game of musical chairs with the Mountain Rescue Building, with the Armory, and with the Old Powerhouse. And there's a sequence of events, and this is going to make it easier to stay on that schedule of getting Mountain Rescue up and running and so on.
I think we should always be looking for opportunities to purchase, to make office space available, or to keep our eyes open for those kind of acquisitions. But I agree with John that one of the major intents of this city council and the previous city council was to free up the Armory as soon as possible for community use. And this proceeds with that timeline to allow the Armory to be used as community use. That doesn't mean that we can't do change orders in the future if times change. But I don't want to undo what the previous council did. I don't want to get engaged in having everything undone or attempted to be undone. That I think that we gave considerable discussion and thought into how we're programming the buildings, the Old Powerhouse, the Armory, this building. And so I would like to proceed with what we have intended and keep the time moving forward to use the Armory as public facility.
I want to elaborate on a couple thoughts. One is, I think we got to acknowledge how special the Old Powerhouse is. This is not office space. This is a really cool building on a special piece of property that I think it would be a terrible shame to build out as offices and probably retain as offices forever. So I think there's a unique opportunity there to take some of the pressure off of the other desires of the community for community uses in the Armory and really be able to execute something properly and feasibly at the Armory. I also think that the building across the street, which again is one of several options, but the one across the street is more proximate to this building, does provide some efficiency by doing that. And I would be supportive of perhaps splitting these ad service change orders into phases where we're doing things that are focused on the exterior of the building and getting those going right away in order to maintain progress, and perhaps separate out the specific design and space planning of the interior into a later phase to give us some opportunity to work on this.
We're happy to do whatever the council sees as appropriate with this. My request would be is that we would need to understand very quickly what that internal programming is, though, because it affects the HPC application as it relates particularly to mechanicals. With the structure that might be necessary based upon different uses. As you recall, for example, there was a rather large conversation about it becoming a restaurant use that would have substantial upgrade needs compared to an office space to accommodate that use. So just giving you sort of the two extremes is that I don't want to build it out as office space and undersize it for what you're thinking for public use.
Fair point.
I think that asset management and is going to execute this properly, whether it's for a use that Councilman Guth approves of, might be another consideration. But I have faith that it will be executed properly and efficiently.
Sam, any comments?
I love the outside the box thinking, and I mean, more than anything for this conversation, I feel like it should just be incorporated in future decisions as far as like how to piece everything together. Because yeah, the Old Powerhouse, you know, it being offices, it doesn't feel like that's the greatest utility of the building. So coming into this conversation later on, it would be wonderful if offices could go into a different commercial space if that was a valid price. And I don't know, it also might help with the conversation about like where ACRA goes and after the Armory is built, and maybe gets us into the Armory quicker. It all sort of like plays together. So I'm not sure if there is a phasing that like Bill talked about that could be done, so there is some potential for wiggle room again to not have it be all offices, but obviously this conversation just started just right now, so it's tough to wrap my head around as far as what's actually possible versus what is ideal.
Yeah, I guess then I would ask that question. The nature of these contracts, and Sarah, you were just saying that, you know, there needs to be some sort of interior definition going on. Is there the opportunity for contracts for the outside of the building and other work to get it prepared for a shell?
My comments refer to is the council will need to make a decision about programming much sooner than later because it affects the direction given to the contractors in these vendors. So for example, to have an architect address restroom requirements for an office versus what might be more appropriate for a larger community use and the nature of how you intend it to be used are things we should be programming from the beginning and not trying to retrofit later. So whether those are all actuated now, right? The code might have a requirement that's very small, but let's be realistic about the use of this park and space if we're turning it into public space. And the other piece I would just say is definitely, I get concerned about the electrical draw that may be necessary, depending upon what you're thinking about for use out there. So if you're thinking amplified noise for theater or amplified activity, that is something that will have a certain type of, will have a certain level of three-phase power pulled into the building, but it may require us to look at additional transformers to get the power there, which increases the scope of the project. Those are things we should be doing from the beginning and not be retrofitting partway through and increasing the design costs for the community because we were unclear in the beginning of the use.
A totally valid point. I think it's a conversation we could get through relatively quickly. You know, I personally am not suggesting a restaurant use, but I think that there are a lot of, we've heard, and Tori, you specifically have mentioned to me a lot of other requested community uses for the Armory that I think are going to be really hard to fit everything into one building. So I think we could narrow that list pretty quickly and come to agreement on what might work. I think it's worthwhile to at least have that conversation. And again, I think we could proceed with some element of this application work, you know, without getting too far down the road where we're running into some of the issues that Sarah's referencing, but really hash that out. Again, it's just such a special building on a special piece of property that putting office, you know, city staff offices in, I think is a mistake.
You're echoing some of the same comments I made 4 years ago. Yeah, you know, when it comes to the design that we're doing and the contract that we're doing, it would be wonderful if this building was built so that it could handle whatever use it ends up being. That would be great. As far as this exact proposal, I do not support buying 4,000 square feet in a shared building. I like your idea, but I'd be way more comfortable with a full purchase of a building and not condominiumize space in a building for the city. So in this particular instance, I'm not supportive of any delays for that parcel, but I do agree with you that it would be nice if the design that we are going with here does allow us future flexibility if things are different. You know, staff did share with me that some of the work that they tried to make available to have community space down there. So there has been some thought given to this. I'm just wondering, you know, once again, these contracts, we want to move forward with some of the work that needs to be done here, but are there things in these contracts that are locking us into a office use situation that literally in 5 or 10 years, if that circumstance changes, that it's going to be another, you know, major retrofit to change that out?
Yeah, I think Sarah alluded to several things, you know, power requirements, restroom requirements, you know, rooftop mechanical equipment, transformers. Those are big things. So I do think it's worth it. If you have interest in, you know, more of a community-based use rather than city offices, I think the time to have the conversation is now.
Bill, just to be clear, the design team, our intent right now is to obviously program the space as all office, as was directed earlier this year. However, we do hope to implement items in the design that will allow for a large public gathering space downstairs should the direction change in the future. So that would include things like wiring for a catering kitchen, upgraded mechanical systems that can handle a crowd of people, not a crowd of people, but a large room full of people. That kind of aspect is going to be taken into consideration. And that was a discussion that we had after that meeting, knowing that direction could change in the future.
That's good. And Evan kind of alluded to it. The upstairs of that facility and some of the structural limitations we have up there, adding a dormer, that's going to be a less flexible space than the downstairs moving forward.
That's okay.
And
Again, I don't even have a
upstairs.
specific use that I'm advocating for other than something that really targets the community and not city staff
Sure.
offices, so.
I mean, we're looking to optimize the building, and part of that is having that flexibility in the future should the direction change.
Thank you for that. Any other questions, comments? You have one council member that probably would still like amendment to these contracts. I'm hearing back from staff that these contracts kind of cover that for future consideration. Anybody else?
Yeah, I think I'm comfortable moving forward with that based on what I just heard, moving forward with these ad services. But I'd really love to see if we can get some support on having further discussion in the near future on what the uses could be.
I would echo Sarah's concerns that if there is going to be a discussion about changing the use of this in the near future, that we should have that soon.
I think we've had these discussions going back 8 years, since at least 2015.
You
And
did, Ward, but Sam and I.
no, I was not on the council at that time. These discussions predate my time on the council. But these discussions go back 8 years. And I've been involved in some of these discussions on how to program the old power plant, the armory, this building, moving pieces around. And I know that Tori and John also have been involved in the power plant discussions, the use and programming of the power plant. And I know Tori supports public use of that facility. We went through a 7-month process before I was on council for making it a totally public use facility. I want to proceed with it as the council, previous councils have decided, as public offices or city offices.
Thanks.
I'll just say, if it could, I feel like it's public offices because from every discussion we've had and the research I've done, it felt like it had to be. And what Bill, I'd like to think, is saying is you buy a different office space and now it doesn't have to be public offices anymore, and that'd be really nice. So that's where I would.
Yeah, yeah.
So thank you for
Yeah.
saying that.
All right. We will come back to this when we look at approval for the consent calendar. There is, and if you want to try an amendment, we can, but we'll see what happens. Thank you, guys. The next item that he wanted to have discussion on is the 93.
Yes. Do we have any photos of the current condition? I didn't see any in the consent.
So, yeah, I actually did take some photos. I didn't think they would be meaningful. They just didn't really translate. So I didn't include them. I could for sure shoot them your way. I have them. We pulled them from the memo. I didn't think that they really gave a good overlook at what the current conditions are.
It'd be helpful for me. It's not an insignificant amount of money.
So that,
hard for me to understand exactly what the issue is.
there's a steep slope, the backside of those water place units that runs down to Castle Creek Road. It's sloughing off. There was a boulder retaining wall there. It's failing. It's continuing to drop. I can't remember what the unit number is, but the yard has probably dropped 8 inches over the last, say, 12 months, just continuing to fail. One of the reasons of the high cost is that we can't, I'd love to do a boulder retaining wall back there, repair the boulder retaining wall or an MSE wall. You can't get equipment back there to do that. So we're kind of tied to micropiles. There's not a lot of space back there to maneuver at all. You cannot get a big excavator in there. You can't bring dump trucks in there. So we're kind of hamstrung on what type of retaining we're using for that slope. And it has to be done. I mean, we have to do something there.
These are owned units, not rental units, right? These are owned by individuals?
They're varied. However, there is specific information in the deed restriction that this would be the responsibility of the city of Aspen. This is a deed restriction that protects an asset that gives us a location to maintain our employees regardless of whether it's rental or ownership.
Understood. And this property on the condominium map assuming there is a condominium map for this property, is common area? General or limited common element?
Do you know?
No,
for this
it backs
location?
up to an owner's property. Several properties. It is not common space on the backside.
I understand, but on a condo map, there are all sorts of permutations, but typically things outside of walls, the four walls of the unit, if you will, would be what's called a general or a limited common element.
Sure.
So
It is, what's clear here is though, however, this is not platted similar to most private properties in town or even other deed restricted properties. It was the way that the affordable housing subdivision was created up there and its entitlements and the follow-up deed restrictions do not place that burden on owners through assessments.
And I presume you looked at concrete solutions?
Sure.
Poured concrete wall solutions instead of microphone?
Yeah, we looked at MSE, we looked at boulder retaining wall, the concrete being an MSE wall, and it's not the best bet.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, guys. And Ward, I'd pull 83 for you if I could, but I just can't do it, man. All right. Bill, I'll give you an opportunity here. If you would like to, I'll go through these. If you want me to pull those for consideration and vote, I'll do it.
Thanks. No, again, I'm comfortable, based on what staff said. I would love to either, after this or at the next meeting, talk about having a discussion to revisit this use and perhaps explore office space elsewhere.
I appreciate that. Thank you for that. With that, I'll take a motion for the consent calendar.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Seconded.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Can we have a roll call vote for the consent calendar, please?
Counselor Doyle,
Yes.
Counselor Guth,
Yes.
Counselor Hohenstein,
Yes.
Counselor Rose,
Yes.
Mayor Tory.
Yes.
So to clarify, Mr. Mayor, I'm hearing 3 of you are directing me to look at alternatives in the powerhouse. Is that accurate? 3 of you are in favor of that?
My request specifically would be, let's explore alternative office space opportunities for city staff, and let's have a discussion about what community-serving uses or community-focused uses, because I suppose city offices are community-serving, but community-focused uses might be desirable for the Old Powerhouse.
I would love to have that discussion.
Ward or John?
No, I don't want to go back there.
I'm not interested in returning to the conversation.
I'm not either in this setting at this table. Bill, I think that you need to have a meeting with Sarah or somebody that Sarah wants you to get some information on this from. We went around this wheel several times. So I'd love for you to get all the information that I've seen over the last 6 months. And then you can figure out how you want to pursue that conversation.
Okay, thanks.
Because there might be opportunity out there, but we've been around that.
So I hear we're within the 2-hour limit then, just to clarify for staff time for the request still? Okay, that's all I need to know. Thank you.
Yeah, but I'd love to get Bill some of that information. All right, we are on to our notice of call-up. We have an HPC approval for 214 West Bleecker. This is minor development, relocation, and variation review.
There, I need 1 second to plug in.
Yeah. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Ready when you are.
Go right ahead.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Amy Simon, Planning Director, here to briefly present a notice of call-up for an approval that HPC granted recently. This is 214 West Bleecker, a 6,000 square foot lot in the West End. In the image on the screen on the left, you see a wonderful picture from the 1800s of this property, and then on the right is a more current condition. This property has an existing addition that you see in the plan view on the top that was added in the early 1990s onto the back of the Victorian house. There's also a historic shed, the smaller little rectangle you see on the left side of the screen on the alley. There's only about 20 or so Victorian-era sheds left in town, or outbuildings, barns, and things like that on designated sites, so they're important. And I'll explain to you in a minute how that played into HPC's review. They conducted a minor and relocation review for this property where the new owner wants to pick up the entire existing structure. There's already a partial basement, but they'd like to fully excavate the basement. Although this addition isn't necessarily in keeping with today's design guidelines, it is good that they're retaining existing construction and not disposing of usable materials. So we were happy to see that. HPC approved the lifting of the structure for the basement and setting it right back down where it is. That required a couple of setback variations because the existing structure already encroaches slightly into the west side yard. So that was granted. And then a major component of the discussion was the shed at the back of the property. It currently sits partly into the alley. It is subject to being hit by snowplows and traffic. There's snow piled against it. It's actually settled quite a bit into the ground. So HPC worked with the architects to approve moving it slightly onto the property. It'll be about a half foot from the rear property line, placing it on a new slab, getting it out of the ground, and restoring it. To recognize the applicant's effort on that front, HPC did grant a 175 square foot floor area bonus so that the shed doesn't count against the maximum floor area for the livable part of the property. The approval was unanimous. It did take 2 meetings, and the architect and applicant were really helpful in working with HPC to achieve any restoration opportunities on the project. So we think it's going to be quite successful and recommend council uphold the decision.
Council members, questions, comments, suggestions?
I went by that structure today, and the picture in the package shows that it was all white, and I'm happy to see it being restored to the colorful highlights that we see there today.
Well, I don't know that it will be. I should say the picture on the bottom shows a side view, the east elevation of the property now, and the Victorians towards the front, and the rear is the 1990s addition. All they're trying to depict with that color is where they're going to remove some details that confuse what's old and new. There's some like fish scale shingles in the little gable ends that are shown as pink there. So it's not necessarily representing a color scheme. We don't review paint color. I have to say I agree with you that I see pretty much every home in Aspen being painted white lately, and even though white's my favorite color, it's getting to be a lot. And it does downplay some of the details on older Victorian structures, but we don't typically review that.
Yeah, I know it's not under the purview of HPC, but I just think it's really attractive that way. It was whitewash, it was painted and sprayed, and now it's being highlighted, and it looks better than when it was white. And it's a funky little shed on the back that probably good for putting bikes in, but it is funky. I don't want to call it up.
Thanks. Anybody else care to call up this evening?
I'm happy to uphold.
Okay, I don't see a motion for call-up, so
Okay,
thank you so
very
much.
Thanks, Amy.
Thanks, Amy.
That'll bring us to our public hearings this evening. Our first one is ordinance number 11, series 2023. This is regarding House Bill 23-1255.
Mr. Mayor, while Haley's getting set up, for the record, Ben Anderson, Deputy Director of Community Development, and Haley Hart, Long Range Planner with Community Development.
With your permission, I'd like to share some slides.
Please.
right. Great. Well, I wanted to just start by recapping some of the questions that we heard from council during first reading and provide responses to those questions in regards to the Colorado House Bill 1255. This is ordinance number 11. First, council asked if it would be possible to approve ordinance 11 for a period shorter than the 24-month as allowed through House Bill 1255, and to answer in short, yes, but staff would recommend that council consider a few points. First, staff is unsure about the legal implications of a 12-month ordinance, especially if the city were to need to extend it. A 12-month timeline would mean that staff would prioritize these code changes, which is possible, but we would probably need to shift a few priorities around within community development and code changes. But the 24-month as allowed in the House bill is both legally viable through the bill and allows for staff to be thoughtful in considering consultant help in code changes as directed by council.
I need to clarify that a little
Yes.
bit, if you don't mind. The House bill says that the temporary non-renewable item is you can do for 24 months in any 5-year period. So I do think you could do 12 months and then extend it, or even have a gap and do it later. So I do not have a question that you could do 12 months and then extend it. What you can't do is go beyond 24 months in that 5-year period.
Thanks, Jim.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. We were unsure. So the second question was in regards to what is allowable during the code amendment process during the 24-month temporary non-renewable anti-growth law. And to reiterate, this is a temporary law, so it merely just extends the current land use code as is. So you can think of it as this status quo law for the next 24 months. And during that period, amendments to both GMQS and non-GMQS chapters can proceed per council direction, but both of those are very viable. The last question, if ordinance 11 is passed, the question was in regards to what are the land use code procedures and what is the process for that. Staff would be able to begin with a work session if desired by council to make those amendments to the land use code, but Title 26 outlines what the process exactly is that staff must follow to make amendments. That includes a formal policy resolution to open the code, a formal recommendation from P&Z, a formal recommendation from the HPC, and then first and second reading in front of council. And again, these responses are due to the passing of House Bill 1255, which was signed by Governor Polis June 7th, so in between our first and second reading. This bill preempts local municipalities from enacting anti-growth law, which limits how many residential units are built in a year. And to emphasize again, this bill is in response to residential development only, so has no impacts to lodge, commercial, or other types of development in our community. And this will invalidate city's annual growth allotments within Title 26, which is where the temporary non-renewable anti-growth law comes into play.
This is a table that we've shown you before, and this, in some variation, has been part of Aspen's land use code for more than 45 years. And again, on this table, the allotments around residential are the ones that are impacted by 1255. Just to be clear, commercial lodging are not impacted by 1255. And if it were simply an effort of modifying this table to come into compliance with 1255, I think that that's a fairly straightforward process as we understand it. However, if you could move the next slide. I think as most of you know, over that 45 years that we've had the growth management system in place, we have stacked a lot of things on top of that allotment system. our employee generation and mitigation system, important policies like multifamily replacement, inclusionary zoning. The change in use requirements that we have within the code are tied to growth management requirements. And certainly, as we look across the code, those things, which I think to staff's understanding have been important parts of the landscape here in Aspen, in some cases for decades, those things have, dealing with those things have tendrils throughout the code that we need to understand better. It's a new law. We've got a complicated code, and the intersection of those things are a little unclear. And then beyond the particular, direct growth management implications, because of how important this system has been to Aspen's entire land use system over time, our subdivision standards, multiple definitions within our code, and also, and this, has to do with our intersection with our friends at Pickens County, the urban growth boundary and the relationship of that topic within the land use code are things that are tied to this topic and uncertain. And so I think staff's perspective is responding to 1255 by the time it came into effect was going to be a near impossibility to do with any kind of confidence. And so that's really the nature of our recommendation around Ordinance 11.
And again, I know this is just reiterating, but, if passed by council, Ordinance 11 will allow for the provision within the House bill called the Temporary Non-Renewable Anti-Growth Law. So again, this just extends the applicability of the current land use code for up to 24 months. Again, we can think of it as just the status quo. So if approved, the Temporary Non-Renewable Anti-Growth Law will give staff 2 years to conduct research within our own code and its intersection within GMQS and the larger Title 26. This ordinance gives approval for hiring consultants, but staff would request full budget approval through the fall supplemental to hire and work with legal and planning consultants. It allows for the community development team to continue on with business as usual in reviewing and issuing permits. And again, this law, if passed, is just for 24 months. At that time, the applicability ends. Therefore, we would want to have new code in place before that 24-month period expiration. So staff's recommendation is that council reads and approves ordinance number 11, series of 2023, implementing a temporary non-renewable anti-growth law on second reading. Happy to open up the floor for discussion and questions on this.
Any questions?
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Haley. Do you believe at this point that the demo allotment system will be invalidated by 1255?
I think it's a question. Certainly when it was composed, it was tied, as so many other things are, to this allotment system. And I think it was the mechanism through which that concept that council wanted to pursue at the time that we implemented that with. And certainly, I think 1255 raises questions, one that I think we're prepared to answer yes or no on that question at this time. It may be that there's other paths to get to that same set of outcomes as we sort of investigate, how this is all going to be reorganized.
Thanks. Do you have a consultant in mind to use for this effort that you think is qualified and capable?
We have folks that we have worked with previously that understand the nuances of the GMQS system. We don't have anybody certainly under contract yet. We haven't asked for any quotes or talked about scope with anybody yet. But certainly, because of the complexity and the sort of layering of our systems, getting a consultant on board that doesn't know those nuances would be a huge learning curve for somebody to come in. So certainly folks that have worked on these topics with us before are, folks that we're probably going to be interested in talking with, should we get direction tonight.
Great, thanks. That's it for my questions.
Any other questions at this time? This is a public hearing regarding ordinance number 11. I'll open the public hearing portion of this item. Are there any members of the public that wish to speak on ordinance number 11 this evening? Not seeing any online, not seeing any in the room. I'll close the public hearing portion of this item and bring it back to council table. John.
Ready for a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve ordinance number 11, series of 2023, implementing a temporary non-renewable anti-growth law.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion?
Yeah, I would like to suggest that we do this as 12 months initially, see how far we get. I think that 2 years is a long time. I think it will take away focus, and this is pretty major. This has huge implications for our land use code, and there's a lot of unresolved questions, and I think it should be something that's focused on and doesn't provide a lot of opportunity to go down tangents and rabbit holes. I think it should stay focused and efficient, and I think that by putting a little bit more a little bit tighter of a timeline on it is a benefit to the community.
Thank you. Any other comments or discussion? All right. Bill, because you brought it up in conversation, I appreciate what you're saying. I'm not interested in putting what I'd almost call an artificial timeline of 1 year. In our last meeting that we had on first reading and such, we made it very clear that we were interested in getting this done as quickly as possible. I think that's staff's intent as well. I'll be quite honest with you. I think 12 months is cutting it a little tight, and I just, I think you're right. This is important. I want to give them the ability to really work on this, focus on it, and make a game plan to attack it. I don't expect them to be telling us that they have made a game plan that takes 24 months. I think that they're, as they always do, they try to get things done early so that they can bring them back to us in case there's any more changes, modifications, or other outcomes that we want. So I'm going to support this as it is tonight for 24 months.
Same for me, just because I remember you had said that we could always cut it back. I know we can add to it too, but I know we can cut it back, and I hope we get updates on how it's going to see what the progress is.
He knows. He means add to it if we did the 12-month, not the 24.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about. Not add the 24, add the 12.
Right.
But cut back from 24 is also a possibility. Yep.
Thank you for that, Sam. We have a motion and a second. Can we have a roll call vote for ordinance number 11?
Counselor Doyle?
Yes.
Counselor Guth?
Yes.
Counselor Hohenstein?
Yes.
Counselor Rose?
Yes.
Mayor Tory?
Yes. Thank you, guys.
Thanks,
Good
man.
luck.
Thanks, Haley.
Thank you.
We'll be back to talk about this for sure.
Yeah, it's just
We'll
very
be seeing
interesting.
you again.
All that housing stuff that came out of the governor's office, basically, very interesting. I think may be appropriate in other parts of the state, but not sure about ours. All right, well, that brings us on our public hearings down to resolution number 97, and I believe we're actually going to kind of hear these together, 97, 98, 99, and 100. We're up to 100, huh?
Wow.
It's not even the solstice.
And these are regarding demolition allotment appeals.
Mr. Mayor, Kay Johnson will introduce this, and she'll explain the process that we're going to have to handle this matter.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. The next 4 items on your agenda are public hearings to consider appeals filed by 4 demolition allotment applicants. These 4 applicants were denied a demolition permit in 2023 because all 6 demolition allotments had already been awarded as a multi-year allotment in 2022. These applicants now appeal the director's determination to deny the application due to insufficient allotments, and have requested council review the director's decision, but also use its powers and grant a one-time increase in demolition allotments to accommodate each of these applicants. I just want to kind of walk through the procedure. Mr. Klein is here on behalf of all 4 applicants. We've agreed to consolidate these hearings, so you will hear the legal arguments are essentially the same in all 4 appeals. Instead of taking these each independently, we thought it was a better use of everybody's time to consolidate these arguments because they are essentially the same in each case. The records are slightly different. I want to apologize if the way the agenda appeared was confusing. I tried to make it as clear as possible. You have a record that's applicable to all of these appeals, and then you have an distinct record for each appeal that essentially consists of the application and documents unique to that particular appeal. However, they are pretty much the same in each case. The standard of review, this is governed pursuant to section 26.316 of the Land Use Code. Pursuant to that section, it requires council to review the director's decision based solely on the record before the director. So your decision here is based on the record. You're not to consider evidence that was not before the director when he made the decision. Council may not reverse the decision of the director unless council finds that there was a denial of due process or the director exceeded his jurisdiction or abused his discretion. That's the standard of review. You may affirm the decision of the director, reverse the decision of the director, or modify the decision of the director based upon your findings. But again, you may only reverse or deny if you find there's been an abuse of discretion, that the director exceeded his jurisdiction, or the director denied due process. This appeal is slightly unique to most of the other appeals you have before you because there is one other provision of the code that applies. When an applicant appeals a denial of a GMQS application due to insufficient allotments, council has broader powers beyond just simply reviewing the decision of the director. You also have the ability to, pursuant to section 26.470.160 of our land use code, applicants denied an allotment due to insufficient allotments may appeal to council for a development approval. Council may take any such action determined necessary, including but not limited to making a one-time increase in that year's allotments to accommodate the appellant. We also believe that the land use code gives you other options in this case, which is why you have 3 resolutions before you. They present the options as we see them. That's the standard of review and your powers in these types of cases. My understanding is that the mayor is willing to give each side 30 minutes to argue their appeal. I believe Mr. Klein, on behalf of the applicants, would like an opportunity to at least have some time to rebut any arguments I may make, and I think that would be appropriate. Although I think it would also be appropriate to limit that rebuttal, again, to a reasonable amount of time. I don't know if Mr. Klein has anything to add, but I think that covers generally the procedures applicable to the case. We are also able to answer questions. So certainly if you have any questions, please feel free to ask those questions.
Thanks, Kate. I should disclose that Herb and I are neighbors and members of the same condo association and friends. And I don't think it will impact my impartiality, but I think worth disclosing.
Thank you for the disclosure. Mr. True is here to advise council. I'm here on behalf of staff, so I just want to clarify our roles in this case.
I just appreciate that disclosure, and my question is always, would it impact your ability to act in a fair and impartial manner?
No.
You've indicated no.
I'll also disclose that I have a business relationship with Klein, Cote, Edwards, and Citron, and it goes back a couple of decades, and I do not feel that relationship will have any bearing on my ability to render a fair and impartial decision.
Jim, we don't have any proximity issues around these, I don't believe.
Not that I was made aware of. It would have been in the disclosures.
Well, for the record, the addresses here are 210 West Francis, 212 West Francis, 931 West Francis, and 521 McSkimming. So if anybody...
I might have one on Francis, but I don't know how you measure that. I have 433
It'd have to be within 300 feet.
I own 433 Gillespie.
Let's say that again?
433 Gillespie I own.
Did you get a notice?
There were no notices sent in this case.
Okay. So that involves the 931 West France?
No, I think that's probably too far, but the 200 block?
210 and 212?
Well, in order to participate, we're going to need to confirm that your
You're
property
1,000
is
feet.
outside of that.
Sam says 1,000 feet.
1,200, well, direct.
And it's from property line to,
Right, we'll use the measurement required by the code.
Well over 300.
We can do that measurement in the next
please.
2 minutes, okay? Do you mind just giving us the addresses?
433 Gillespie.
433 Gillespie.
It's easy to measure on GIS, so we just do that.
What'd you do?
I mean, granted,
We can proceed with this,
so I ain't as fast.
we can proceed this while they confirm that.
Thank you.
Because these,
Yeah, and I think it sounds like it's gonna be okay, but thank you. Okay. Thanks, Kate.
thank you. I would ask that the applicant be able to go first. I'd be given the same time to respond and that he be given some time for rebuttal, although, within the limits the mayor feels are reasonable.
I appreciate it. And the only, I don't know if you're gonna do any background about the situation, about dates, about allotments and the like. If there's information that needs to be added, I hope that you will.
We can certainly try to do that. I think it's in the record, and so we can try and point you to where in that record the dates are and remind anybody of the dates they feel are relevant.
Thank you. All right.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mayor and honorable council members, for the record, my name is Herb Klein. I'm here representing 3 property owners who among them own the 4 properties that are subject of these appeals. This is a matter of great importance to them, and they are here in person. 2 owners and 1 representative of an owner. They're in the first row here behind me. All of the properties at issue in these appeals are old. They range from 58 to 67 years old. The Singer property, and Mr. Singer is here, was built in 1960. It's 63 years old. The property owned by Dramatic View Holdings, and Mr. Stephen Corman, the representative of Dramatic View, is here. That was built in 1959. It's 64 years old. The Tobin family, and Ian Tobin is here, right over my right shoulder. They own 2 properties, one at 210 West Francis and one at 212 West Francis. 210 was built in 1965, it's 58 years old, and 212 was built in 1956. It's the oldest among these properties, it's 67 years old. I would like to speak with you about discretion, fairness, and the law. The process in 2022 was screwed up. I think everybody understands that the demo allotment program got off on a bad foot. As a result of that, claims were settled. People who felt they were denied due process had their claims settled. And the council awarded additional allotments, and at the same time directed that those additional allotments be taken away from the 2023 demo allotments, leaving none available to these applicants. As Kate mentioned, when you adopted the demo allotment program, in your wisdom, you adopted the code provision that Kate referred to. It's section 2647160C. I'm just going to refer to it as the discretionary provision. I think sensing that the number 6 was a low number, you might have some issues, you might want to give some flexibility. It was very wise that you created that escape hatch. And that gives you very, very broad discretion. It says you can take any action, including but not limited to making a one-time increase in the annual development allotment sufficient to accommodate the application. So it expressly says you can increase them, but it does not speak to nor require that you reduce the succeeding year's allotments. You didn't have to do that. So you settled the 22 claims by exercising that discretion, and you granted additional allotments to those people. That's what we're asking you to do here tonight. The fairness part is basically these are old houses, they've outlived their useful lives, and maintaining them imposes these very onerous, unreasonable burdens on these owners and really constitutes economic waste. They are not historic. They don't meet current codes for things like energy efficiency, conservation, other environmental regulations. The one at 931 West Francis is not even habitable. The one at 521 McSkimming, it's older, it has a very vertical floor plan. It has a lot of steps. The owner, excuse me, Andy, but he's getting older, we're all getting older. But the steps are a challenge. It's not suitable for him and his children. Its roof needs to be replaced and reconfigured, and many components have reached the end of their useful life. Ian Tobin is here for the Tobin family. He would like to make a couple of comments to you. I'd like to ask Ian to address council.
You need to have a seat right there. Make sure the light is green on your microphone and introduce yourself for the record, please.
Hello, can you hear me? Yes, hello, City Council. Thank you for your time this evening. My name is Ian Tobin. I'm representing my family who's owned those houses at 210 and 212 West Francis for nearly 40 years. Some of the happiest times in my life and theirs have occurred in Aspen. But at this point, those houses have reached, they're falling apart. Quite honestly, the roofs have all needed to be repairs. There are leaks. The foundations as well as the plumbing have all deteriorated. I mean, just the other day, I was returning from a walk with my wife, and the carbon monoxide detectors in 212 were going off because the furnace is, kaput. It's now, so we had to disconnect that just 2 days ago, or actually, sorry, yesterday, and now just gonna roll without heat, hopefully this winter. So as the laundry list of issues with the houses are endless, and it's really the reason why we are, the maintenance of it is no longer economical, as Herb has already said, which is why we're seeking these demo permits. So, thank you for your time this evening and for your consideration on this issue.
Thanks. Question for you. Are you currently residing in one of those homes?
I am not currently residing there. My sister had been for a number of years, and on and off. I was living in 210 from September of 18 up until January of 22 when I moved down to Naples, Florida.
And prior to that, you said they've been in your family for 40 years?
Roughly, yes.
And we're talking about both 210 and 212?
Yes, 210 originally, and then 212 was purchased thereafter.
But both are 40 years?
Roughly, I don't have the exact dates, but in my lifetime, I'm 38 years old, so they've both been in the family since then. So.
Okay. Can you just share with us what was the usage over so many years? Vacation home, you came out?
Mostly vacation, yes, but I mean for the better part of 20 years, we were out here every single vacation. It was a second home for us, really. I mean, I almost moved out here to try and pursue ski racing at 12, but that didn't end up happening. So it was really a true, second home. We were using it often and regularly, and so.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yes, thank you.
And thank you, Ian. And by the way, we did not orchestrate the furnace failure. It just was. So, although you didn't intend to do so, these homeowners are the collateral damage of your effort to cure the 2022 screw-up by eliminating the 2023 allotments. And prohibiting these owners from replacing the buildings is holding them hostage to ongoing costs and unsuitable living conditions. And we think this is patently unfair. The law part, I talked to you about discretion, fairness, and the law. And the law part is that when you granted the 2022 additional allotments, you took that second step by calling them multi-year allotments. Multi-year allotments are the only allotments that can be taken away from succeeding years. A multi-year allotment is a rare bird. It is defined
in section 26-471-10A, it is only for exceptional projects. There are 9 criteria to be a multi-year allotment, and an applicant needs to satisfy at least 5 of those criteria, and all of them involve exceeding code requirements in a number of different areas. You can't just call some a multi-year allotment if it's not a multi-year allotment. You can't make it up. And I know that you're all very well intentioned and you want to try and solve a problem, but it's just not, it's not consistent with the code. The discretionary provision that gives you the right to take any action does not give you the right to do things that the code does not allow. It wasn't as I mentioned before, it wasn't necessary to reduce the 2023 allotments when granting the additional 2022 allotments. You don't, in this proceeding, you can grant additional 2023 allotments without having to take them from 2024. With respect to the multi-year, they also have a special process. Before, council gets the final word, but they have to go through a process where P&Z comments on them, or if it's historic property, HPC comments on them. None of that was done. There was no even attempt to do it. It was just simply a settlement, and you said, we're going to call these multi-year allotments, take them away from 23. That's not okay. And that's the abuse of discretion that we complain of. We ask that you do the right thing, clean up the 2022 mess, grant additional allotments to these owners. From a public policy point of view, we suggest that you don't take them from 2024, or you'll probably be facing the same kind of challenge next year. But that's up to you. We'll take them any way we can get them, okay? But we're just suggesting that maybe you clean it up, start fresh in 2024, and get this program on the right footing that you wanted when you originally intended by adopting that code provision. There are some other legal issues I can go into, but I think I wanted to kind of keep this at a higher level. I don't have to get into the weeds, but I'm happy to and prepared to do so if you have any further questions, or if Kate, after she tells you that nothing was wrong and everything's okay, I might want to step back in. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions of the applicant at this time?
Is,
Do it later too.
is 931 Francis being inhabited?
No. I
Has
was
it
in
been
it a couple, I
condemned?
was in it a couple of years ago, Ward, and you really can't live in it.
Has it been condemned?
I don't believe so.
I have a question for Kate. I thought demolition process allowed for a demolition for a non-inhabitable or condemned property.
I'm going to let Ben Anderson speak to this. That's a really particular to the code, and I'm here to more speak to the legal issues that I think these applicants have raised. So if you would allow Mr. Anderson to address that, I would appreciate it.
Properties in that condition are exempted. However, it's a determination by the chief building official that it's a condemnable property. It sounded like the issues that were described as it not being habitable could be resolved with some typical maintenance or repair, to my understanding.
And to be clear, again, the appeal is based upon the record before you. That question was not asked of the building department official. So we don't have any information about whether or not it would qualify as a building for that type of procedure.
But that would have been an avenue of approach for the applicant.
If they felt they met that and that they could have approached, I think they could have applied to the chief building official for such a finding, yes.
Thank you.
Quick technical question, and I'm on the Pickens County Assessor's website. I was wondering what the difference between actual year built and effective year built was, if anyone knows that, whether that be the applicant or Kate or someone else.
You know, I don't
No.
know. I think
Maybe.
sometimes, a building permit might be issued by a certain, and it takes time to build the property, so when they move in, it might straddle some years, construction and actual living. I don't know.
In my experience, it's generally based on substantial enough remodels to
Yeah.
qualify it as a new house.
Sam, I do want to emphasize that this consideration is based on what's in the record. Outside information that you develop there is not in the record, and it's not really something that you should consider. It's a minor issue here for this question, but I would caution you that effort. The record is in front of you.
Thank you. Good for now.
Thank you.
And just to clarify, none of these are designated Aspen Modern?
No. If I may, Mayor? If there's no other questions, may I make a statement?
Please.
Thank you. First, I just want to say that in my statement, I've spelled out what I think the issues are before you on appeal. So as I said, I think the first question is a review of the director's determination pursuant to Section 316. So the question before you is, did the director exceed his jurisdiction, deny due process, or abuse his discretion when he determined that there were no allotments available? So in your record is Resolution 140 Series of 2022. That was adopted on November 29th of 2022. That authorized the city manager to enter into 6 settlement agreements. Those 6 settlement agreements resolve 6 appeals of individual or entities people that have been denied demolition allotments. They appealed pursuant to a different procedure, but ultimately agreed that the same procedure we're using here would apply. To resolve those, and again, the circumstances were somewhat different because 2022 was the first year we rolled out our demolition allotment process. We did enter into 6 settlement agreements. They're all in your record. Through those settlement agreements, council agreed to issue 6 multi-year allotments to those 6 applicants. The code section that was relied upon very clearly said council can do whatever they deem necessary to accommodate the applicant. It also states that the appeal is to council for development approvals. While I understand Mr. Klein's argument, I do feel that what council did, and I feel it's strongly defensible, was within your power. So I don't think there was an abuse of discretion. You in those settlement appeals or settlement agreements directed the director of community development to reduce the 2023 allotments. So I don't think he abused his discretion. He acted fully in accordance with your direction. So the first question before you is, was the director's determination that there were insufficient allotments an abuse of discretion or exceeding his jurisdiction? I would ask that you find that it's not, based upon the record that was before him at the time. He followed the settlement agreement direction that council gave him, which was to reduce those allotments. I believe that you had the authority to direct him to do so under this very broad power granted to you in Section 470.160 of the Land Use Code. I know lots been made, and I can't say that it wasn't before the director. The director was certainly aware of what happened in 2022, but I just want to be clear that the catalyst as to why issues with the initial allotment, the granting of initial allotments, was in part due to unforeseen circumstances that the Community Development Department really had no way of foreseeing, created in some part by the applicants and their decision to submit numerous applications for the same property. And again, it was an email system, so we were, I think, to be fair, we went back and looked at what time those came in, what time they actually hit the city server. But I think we all recognized that it was a new thing, and so in part, those settlement agreements were in recognition of the fact that it was a first time, it was our first time implementing this program, and that it created special circumstances. I don't think we had those circumstances here. These applications came in around January 3rd of 2023. There wasn't a mad rush like we saw in 2022. And to be fair, Community Development had issued a pre-application, this is in your record, telling them that the 2023 allotments had already been issued and giving them some options. In any event, I want to get back to what I started with, which is the issues to be decided on appeal. So if you find, and if you uphold the director's decision that there were insufficient allotments, then the question becomes, what else can you do? Because you do have these additional powers. I see three options. I think you can do what Mr. Klein has asked, and you can increase the allotments to accommodate these applications. So you can grant them a 2023 allotment, even though all 6 have already been awarded. Staff does not support that because we feel it would undermine the purposes of Ordinance 13. Ordinance 13 had very specific findings in it about why it was necessary to cap demolition. Those are set forth in my argument, but basically Ordinance 13, the purpose of it was to reduce production of solid waste created by residential development and further align city policies with adopted climate and protection policies and regulations. If you just grant 4 more 2023 allotments, it seems to undermine the reason for capping these in the first place. So that is why staff does not support it, and staff can certainly speak to that further. You also have the ability to do what you did with the last set of appeals, which is to grant a multi-year allotment. You do have the discretion to reduce the 2024 allotments or not reduce them. That's fully within your discretion. I think, again, to uphold the purposes of Ordinance 13, it would make sense to reduce the 2024 allotments, again, if you were to grant these as multi-year allotments. And you could also just decline to accommodate these applicants. So there's no requirement that you take any action if you find that the director acted in accordance acted within his jurisdiction and didn't abuse his discretion. These are all available to you. There's 3 resolutions in your packet. So, if you choose to take one of these 3 options, I will say all 3 resolutions affirm the decision of the director. I don't think there's any evidence in this record that he exceeded his jurisdiction or abused any discretion. As far as any due process arguments, I think from a legal perspective, those would fail on grounds related to whether or not, in fact, there is an actual property right at issue here. That's getting a little deep into the legal arguments. They're in the briefing. But ultimately, I think that there was sufficient information in the code to put, and in the pre-application summaries that were issued, to put applicants on notice as to what was required. Finally, if council is considering granting either an additional allotment for 2023 or granting a multi-year allotment, I would ask that council consider, again, that's sort of outside of the appeal, because while the appeal as to whether the director acted in accordance with the municipal code is based upon the record, I think your ability to do whatever you deem necessary to accommodate these appeals gives you broader discretion. And to the extent you want to consider those, I would ask that you inquire of staff as to if they have any recommendations about which of those would be more appropriate in these cases.
Question for you. So outside of this allotment appeal, do these applicants have the opportunity to petition to council or request of council a demolition allotment?
I think this would be the procedure to do that.
Well, this is an appeal for the denial of their demolition allotment.
Right.
So here today, I am looking at this from 3 points, and that is, again, abuse of discretion, exceeding authority, and due process. So outside of this appeal for the denial of their allotment, do these applicants have the opportunity to put in a request or an appeal, not an appeal of their denial, but an appeal for an allotment.
Well, it'd be
So-
well, I think, I'm sorry if I,
No, go ahead.
Ben's here to address, I believe, and assume is the multi-year allotment request that Mr. Klein discussed that has certain criteria that would allow them to submit an application for a 2024 allotment.
But if I could answer your question, for them to ask you to increase the allotment count for 2023, they have to be first denied for insufficient allotments, which they were. So they've met that criteria or that trigger to now get to you. But this is the forum in which you can hear that request.
But I was trying to address the concept of applying for a multi-year allotment. Maybe Ben can describe it better than I.
Yeah, the multi-year allotment request has been in the code for a long time. This is not specific to the demolition allotment process. It was proposed in the pre-application summary as an option to the applicants prior to them submitting their applications. They chose to submit for a 2023 allotment as opposed to pursuing a multi-year allotment, but that path would still be available to them.
And what about additional allotments in the current calendar year? Without borrowing from next year, what is their opportunity to request an allotment outside of this appeal?
The only other request that could be made to council would be folks that qualified for the 35-year local who has lived and owned their property for more than 35 years.
That's what Kate was pointing out, that the way to get 2023 allotments is through this appeal process. Multi-year allotments, they could go in a different path through a separate application. However, we do firmly believe that that the authority of council to address the appeal allows the grant of multi-year allotments also.
Yeah. But so this appeal would be the only way to get before council to request a 2023 allotment, just a standard allotment. This is the only avenue to get to you.
Because in Mr. Tobin's family's case, while they have owned these properties for 40 years, in the code language, we require full-time residency?
Yes.
Full-time residency?
Again, they did not apply for that 35-year local allotment. I don't know that they would meet the requirements. That was not, again, in the record that's before you. Certainly, if you deny their appeal and they think they could meet that requirement, they can apply under that section. I just don't know that that's really applicable to them.
All right, other questions?
So the 2022 allotments, they were done on August 8th, and
That was the application
Yeah.
date. That was the opening of the application date, correct?
what would the opening of the application date for 2023, January 1st?
Yep.
And when were these,
Submitted?
Submitted.
January 3rd.
First business day.
Yeah,
First
first
business-
business day after the new year, correct?
all four of them?
Yes.
And there obviously, there hasn't been any other demolition.
There were actually 5 applications, I believe, submitted, but only these 4 chose to appeal.
Okay. And yeah, that's it I have for now. Thank you.
Yeah.
Questions? Comments? Okay.
A question, just to make sure I'm clear on this, that at the time the applicants were in a meeting prior to actually submitting, they were made aware that there were no more 2023 allotments available.
So in this case, because demolition allotments are governed sort of by the same rule, what ComDev did, and please correct me if I'm wrong, community development people, but my understanding is anybody expressed an interest, they issued a 2023 pre-application summary that gave them certain instructions, and in that summary, and this is in your record for each case, they were advised that there were no 2023 allotments. They were further advised that they had other options. They could either change their plans to a remodel that didn't trigger demolition, they could apply for a multi-year allotment, or they could apply for that 35-year local allotment if they qualified. So they were advised in that pre-application summary of that information.
I'd just like to add, I think it also said that they could apply under the discretionary provision.
That is true. Thank you, Mr. Klein.
This is a public hearing. We are handling resolutions number 97, 98, 99, and 100, 4 different addresses. But I'll open the public hearing for public comment at this time.
Mayor, I would ask that you not open it for public comment. Again, this is a review strictly of the record.
It sure is.
As it is required to be listed as a public hearing under the code, but as I understand it, your review pursuant to that 316 section is strictly, is limited to the record.
That is correct.
I appreciate that.
So I apologize for that confusion. I know it can be.
Well, is it possible for members of the public to comment and not have it be considered part of the reviewed record?
Well, in this situation, I think it may be appropriate to take some comments, as Kate had suggested earlier about staff even addressing the issue about having the additional, whether a 2024 allotment or an additional 2023 allotment, if that is the focus. I don't think it's appropriate to discuss the issue about the determination of the action of the director and whether he abused his discretion or exceeded his jurisdiction. It's an interesting nuance, but I just don't think it's appropriate to discuss that director decision. It's appropriate to discuss whether additional allotments should be granted here. So if it's brief discussions on that issue, I would recommend that those comments be taken.
Thank you. Yes. Mr. Sarpa, if you don't mind, come on up. I would ask you to use the second microphone, not the first microphone.
Okay, thank you.
Make sure it's green there.
It is green, thank you. John Sarpa, thank you all very much for the time you put in all these matters. Having been a public official, I know how hard it is to weigh all these all the time. I'm only addressing the discretion, not the discretion, excuse me, only the question of whether or not there should be an additional allocation. I'm a family friend about 40 years or maybe more of the Tobins, which is why I'm here. Obviously, I followed this when you put the first thoughts together about what to do and how to do it, then it got very complex because of the way it was responded to. Staff and the council at the time tried to do your best, did do your best to correct it. I'm here to suggest the simplest, straightest, most equitable, fair thing to do at this point. Allocate 4 additional ones for 23. You'll have a fresh start in 24. You don't have to take anything from the future. And it helps, obviously, these people who have older, ready to go homes that need to be demolished. And I don't think adding that 4 undermines your ordinance 13. It's still there. Still only have that 6. We don't know yet about the implications of the state law and all that. That could even have an impact. So I encourage you to listen to these people, do the fair, right thing, allocate 4 for 23, and then you'll have a clean slate to start in 24. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Yep.
If there's other well-behaved members of the public, we would invite them to share their comments as well. Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing.
Mr. Mayor, I would suggest that if the planning staff have comments regarding this issue, I think it would be appropriate for Philip or Ben to express the concern they have for the allocation of 2023 allotments. Second microphone.
Second mic, green light.
The next one.
Is that why? Yeah. Thank you. not quite so swift sometimes. You know, I think certainly the code, as it's been written for a long time in growth management, gives council discretion to respond to the circumstance in the way that you see fit. I think from staff's perspective, we went through a long process with the community that landed on this idea of the development allotment in response to those concerns. Council agreed with that path, and we put the process in place. I think the discussion at that time was about a whole series of issues around impacts of the landfill, around the intensity of construction activity. It was around, you know, impacts to neighbors. And, you know, I think as we looked at a lot of things in response to what led ultimately to the moratorium, you know, following the declaration of the moratorium, you know, there was, I think, consensus amongst council at the time that this was the response, and there was lots of discussion about that number being responsive to, I think as council saw it, the impacts of this type of redevelopment activity. And so again, you have full discretion this evening, but I do think that allocating 2023 additional allotments above 6 does undermine that direction that council put in place when you landed on that number in 2022 in Ordinance 13. So with that, I think, you know, I think that's really about all staff has to say, is that I do think that there were clear policy outcomes that council was pursuing, and in staff's view, issuing 2023s as a response to this, additional 2023s as a response to this, undermines that basic policy direction that was formulated in Ordinance 13.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, if I may be given just a few minutes before Mr. Klein's given an opportunity to respond to anything, to just address Mr. Scarpa's comments.
If you'd like.
Just quickly, I know these houses are old. I'm not debating that at all. I think it's in your record. But I do want to point out that 210 and 212 in their notice of appeal in the statement in your record indicate that they want these demolition allotments because they do plan to sell the property, and they recognize it as a value added to the property. So for those two, I just want council to be aware of that. For the 521 McSkimming, that property closed, the Singer family, as I understand it, closed on that property in April 2023. So they knew when they bought it that it was without, that there were no 2023 development allotments. Now, that information was not available to the director, I will tell you, in the application process. We don't review that information. We don't sort of ask why if you're applying for a standard demolition allotment. But, you know, to the point of these are old properties, you know, 931 was purchased in 2018. So I just want council to be fully aware of sort of the circumstances under which these owners acquired the property.
Yeah.
I would like to respond to that, if I may. Mr. Singer went under contract with that property last summer before you adopted the ordinance, before you adopted the demo allotment program. His money went hard before the before the window opened for the 2022 allotments. He had a delayed closing. He closed in April of 23 because the seller wanted more time. So, I mean, and just this whole notion of reliance, I mean, if you know that you're gonna get screwed, it doesn't mean that you can't complain about it, okay? He didn't know. But I don't buy this argument
First of all,
about.
I have to have a little contention with being screwed.
Okay.
I don't think anybody got screwed.
Excuse me. I'm sorry. It just, I don't think there's a reliance issue here at all. Okay? They were told there were no allotments available in 23. Mr. Singer didn't know that when he bought the property. I think it's irrelevant. okay? Every applicant was told by the planning office in the 2023 pre-app notices that there were no allotments available. So we don't have allotments available. If you apply, you're going to get denied, and here's your options to appeal in order to get an allotment, okay? And I apologize for using the word screwed. It's just a little upsetting that, you know, somehow we're, you know, the city's the victim of the city's screwing up the 22 program and then trying to cure it by taking allotments away from 23, which we think is not a lawful act. Okay, that's, you know, we're asking for you to exercise your discretion. You have that ability to do that. You can find that, as written in the proposed resolutions, the planning director did just fine. He did what he's directed to do, and you're exercising your discretion to try and make this right, okay? As far as I understand, the Tobins have not made a decision to sell their property. They can't make a decision until they know what they have, whether they're going to have to live with this and put more money. They're looking at replacing the furnace now. They want heat this winter. So as far as I know, they have not made a decision. Of course, every property owner in Aspen is always faced with the question, do I keep my property, do I sell my property? I mean, I've had properties, I picked out a place they were going to bury me someday. I thought I'd have it for the rest of my life, you know. You just don't know. The bottom line is that is irrelevant. We're here talking about the code, how it's been implemented, how it affects these people, and why they deserve to get these additional allotments. That's what this is all about.
Thanks. I'm struggling a little bit. The decisions that are in front of me are supposed to be based on certain criteria, and at the same time, I'm being told that I have discretion outside of that criteria. I feel like these should be handled as four that are the same and not judge each one of them individually. So I'm having a little bit of a difficulty. I think there's a couple different paths that we can go here. But in this appeal, I don't feel like I have that discretion. So I feel like where I'm at right now is I don't find that there is abuse of discretion, exceeding authority, due process, and the like. But do I think that there's opportunity for consideration? I do, but not in this hearing.
This hearing is designed under our code to allow you to do that, to exercise that discretion and either use 2024 allotments or create additional 2023 allotments. It's been designed that way for a number of years under the GOMQS codes and is available for you. Whether you have enough information and feel it's appropriate now is a different question. And whether you want to exercise that discretion is a different question. You don't have to, but you do have the authority.
Okay. Councilmembers? Board?
Yeah, I see we have three choices here. I don't think that there's any argument or any assertion that the director did anything but perform correctly in all four of these instances. I see that we could either deny allotments entirely. We can allow them to be added to the 2023 allotments, or we could do a multi-year and grant allotments for 2024. For me, denying the allotments entirely is not an option. So I'm left with two. If allotment should be allowed in 2023 or extended to 2024. I understand and appreciate the clean slate in 2024 by adding those allotments to the 2023, as Mr. Sarpa has suggested. I, however, agree with Mr. Anderson that adding the allotments to the 2023 undermines the intent of Ordinance 13, which was to limit the allotments to 6, and that number was arrived at as a, looking at multiple years of demolition permits that were requested. There was a spike in, I think, 2021, where it was around 13, but the average over the years was 6 or 7. We made some horse trading at the table, decided 6, but allowed for 2 for council discretion. So I am in the, although I'd like to see us working with a clean slate in 2024, I would prefer that all 4 of these be allowed demolition permits for 2024, not 2023, that I would like to maintain and uphold the intent of the mitigation that was decided upon by council in 2022, I think it was, ordinance 13, 2022. So I think the intent was good. I think the number was chosen after due consideration. I don't think that increasing the number for 23, which would mean that there would be 10 demolition permits for 2023. I don't think that's appropriate because it undermines and ignores the intent of the council. So I don't think that it's germane, really, perhaps what the intent is for the use of the property. If 2 people or 1 family is going to sell 2 of them, whatever the intent is, I think that I'm basing my judgment on what I think the intent of the council was and how increasing allotments for 2023 versus allowing allotments for 2024, and acknowledging that extending allotments for 2024 opens the door for this whole discussion again at the end of the 2024 allotment process. But we certainly, I think, will start 2025 with a clean slate. And by the time we get to the 2024 process, I want a clear direction for how that process is going to be handled, whether it's a lottery, first come, first serve, or some kind of hybrid between the process that really makes it a fair process and not something that can be gamed. So I feel that 2022 was not administered properly, but so I support 4 allotments for 2024.
Multi-year allotments from 2024.
To be allowed to be issued for 2024 allotments.
Right. All right, thank you for that. Other council comments? Sam?
If the system was in place in 2022 and went off without a hitch, then there would be 6 permits available in 2023. Those 6 permits were already gobbled up. I think I'm glad that that you're on the side of not declining, but I would issue these, increase the allotments for 2023. Otherwise, we're going to run into the same issue in 2024 with only 2 permits allowed at this point. So by that very basic logic, I'm for allowing these in 2023.
Thanks. Bill?
Thanks. I think the fact that we're having this conversation further demonstrates the flawed thinking and the flawed implementation of this demo allotment process. I don't understand, I continue not to understand what meaningful outcome the demo allotment process accomplishes, other than some good billings for Herb. And some other land use consultants. I really don't understand the impact. It does not slow growth. This is not growth. This is replacement of existing housing. It does not preserve workforce housing. Not a single one of these houses that we're talking about tonight is occupied by members of our workforce. It does not generate new workforce housing. In fact, it limits the mitigation fees that do generate new workforce housing. It does not reduce construction activity. In fact, it encourages behavior like intensive remodels in order to stay under the 40% threshold. It does not preserve historic structures. These are not historic structures, neither Aspen modern nor Victorian era structures. It does not meaningfully change the lifespan of our landfill. It does not affect global climate change in a meaningful way. The thinking's so flawed, I'm more than happy to give the additional allotments for 2023. I'd be thrilled to get rid of this demo allotment process entirely. I don't think that it's doing anything other than generating good billings for her. So I think it was a flawed thinking. It's not the way to limit growth in our community.
Made that clear.
Thank you. John, do you have any comments at this time?
Yeah, I do. This is a tough one, but, and I'm focusing on not the story, but what's really being presented to us. And some facts that came out to me, they did not pursue 2024 demolition permits. They went after the 2023, despite knowing in most cases that they weren't available. They had 3 other options to pursue. They chose not to. And I think allocating 4 new demo permits now defeats the purpose of what we were trying to accomplish when we set these rules in motion. And I think that doing this also sets a precedent that precedents are bad. I don't want to see this repeated. And so, yeah, I'm struggling with this. I think I will go along with what Ward said and go with the multi-year permits allocated in 2024.
Thanks for that. 2023 additional, 2023 additional, 2024.
Yep.
All right.
I think it's worth acknowledging that if Herb's legal argument has merit, which Kate disagrees with, to be clear, then we could open ourselves up to someone challenging the validity of multi-year allotments.
I appreciate that, Bill, but Tory was attempting to express his views, and I appreciate it if he could continue.
Yeah, sorry if I interrupted that, Toy.
I don't think this is the hearing where we should be thinking about these individually. I don't think this is the hearing where we should make determinations about this year allotment or next year allotments. It's very difficult sitting in this seat with the question of demolition of properties and this system that was thwarted purposefully by certain folks. I find this to be the bad side of Aspen. I find that I'm unable to support this at this time. I do not find an abuse of discretion. I do not find exceeding authority, and I do not find a lack of due process. I am excited that we are going to be revamping this demo program. I think that there is a better methodology that we can be using. And I am disappointed that in some of these cases, what seems to be a desire for these allotments is not based on anything of community values, but individual gain. So I'm going to stick with what I think I was brought here for today, and that is to support staff's finding, because there were not allotments available. They did not abuse discretion or not provide due process. So I'm not gonna at this time support whether it's borrowing from 2024 or additional 2023s. I would want, or what my hope would be, is that we could have denial of these tonight, but a path other than this for application and appeal to us. You know, we have received other inquiries around this, and so, you know, the system that we put in front of us was for a reason, for many reasons. And while I agree, it is flawed and was flawed, I'm looking forward to some improvements that are going to be coming forth very soon. You know, I hear from people all the time that, you know, their concerns about their aging properties, and I agree, aging properties should have the ability to be demolished. But at the same time, I don't want to put additional pressure on older properties and have them start being targeted because they are the ones that are being demolished. I also believe that the system going forward needs to be based more off of volumetrics instead of individual permits. But that being said, here today, I can't. So, if you guys want to start working on it, I'm happy to facilitate this. You know, in the spirit of compromise, perhaps there is a 2-and-2 solution. 2 borrowed, 2 additional.
Just to speak to the situation we're in, the 6 demolition permits that were granted for 2023 delayed what we're in now until to this hearing. And if we do 4 for 2024, I feel like all we're doing is kicking the can down the road. I almost can guarantee you in 2024, we're going to be back sitting here for more. What?
Precedent, exactly.
No, and that's why I want a clean slate and because I do feel like it is us, the city's fault for being in this situation in the first place. And that's why I feel the way I do about issuing these permits for 2023 and being able to start more of a clean slate in 2024. So.
I think some staff members would take exception to saying it's the city's fault that we're here. That was an unusual situation that was brought about by not just the city's conduct. So accepting full responsibility of that, I think their staff would disagree.
Well, I'm sorry to place blame, just whoever is at fault, it happened because of a system that the city and we put in place. And once again, because of that, we gave permits away for the following year because of a system that was not put in place properly. And now we're sitting here talking about putting it for 2024. And a year from now, I bet we're sitting here talking about more permits that we're probably going to maybe push to 2025, but hopefully not.
And maybe, but that's not an unusual circumstance in the GMQS world, is that often you borrow from future years. It's not an unusual process. I would suggest that you not try to fashion a 2-and-2 method because I'm not too sure how to distinguish individual properties. Not that it would matter, but I don't know how you would distinguish. I would suggest that one way to get past this would be for someone to make a motion and to see if one or more of you wish to change your position. But that would be up to the 4 of you, or 5 of you for that matter. Tory can make his own motion also.
Should we take one more comment, or should we make?
I would not recommend that.
Unless he wants to withdraw his appeal.
If I could, you know, the code gives you a lot of discretion, and I'm just throwing this out as a suggestion, but I don't know if the board's counsel would agree with me on this option, or what staff would feel like, so I'm throwing this out, but I think the code gives you a lot of discretion to reduce future years, not just in a multi-year situation. So I wonder if a compromise, and I suggest this, might be that you grant a 2023 permit, but still deduct from 2024. I don't know if that's, I mean, I get that realistically, at the end of the day, it's still the same thing as a 2024 multi-year allotment. But I'm just trying to help provide some resolution for the applicants in this case.
Thank you for that.
I'm not sure I understand that distinction because the math seems to be the same.
I think the math is the same. I
That's
think it's
the
just
point.
a technicality.
That's the point, is that the
think it
math
allows
is the
them to
same.
get going sooner.
Yeah.
I think it was just to clarify that we're not issuing 2024
Right.
allotments. You're-
Yeah.
And I think you have discretion to reduce future years by whatever amount you see fit. I don't think you have to. Again, I think that this power says anything necessary, any action necessary to accommodate the applicant. So I think you can be creative, and again, I would defer to your counsel and I would defer to staff if I'm completely off base.
Frankly, I would have trouble reducing the number of 2024 allotments without going through a code amendment or some process under that circumstance. The system allows you to borrow from the future. That is codified. I don't know how we, certainly at this meeting, reduce the number, grant for 2023 and reduce the number of 2024 other than through this appeal process. I just see a distinction there, and frankly, the math comes out the same. There still would be.
I think Kate's suggestion is exactly that, though, is that during the next few months while we are working on this, we can set 2024 where.
That would be true.
So.
Not at this meeting.
Not at this meeting.
Is that what you were suggesting?
Well, I think that's one way to handle it. I think that's appropriate, because again, I think you have discretion to set these allotment numbers every year. You can carry them forward, you cannot carry them forward.
Yes.
You can reduce them, you are under no obligation to reduce them. So again, I think the number each year that's authorized can be changed.
All right, I agree with that, but
Yeah.
But at this meeting, at this hearing, at this time, I think it has to be at another meeting to reduce that number. That's all
Yes.
I'm saying.
Yes.
And Philip may have a different position. You want a third, fourth position?
Staff defers to legal counsel on whatever they're talking about right now. I'd like to add some nuance, because I think there's been some comments made about the potential impact of council's decision at the table tonight with respect to things that could happen in future years. And I would just point out, I would remind those members of council who were on council at the time, and point out to new members, whether or not there are 6 or 4 or 8 applicants for future years allotments is the system as designed by council working. So if there are 7 applicants for demo allotments in 2025, and one of them is denied through whatever process we have in place at the time, that is the system of constraining supply working as conceived by council. And so as you are considering the effect of allocating additional 2023 allotments versus dipping into 2024 or some other scenario, I just want to sort of remind council that the constrained supply on demolition allotments was an intentional regulatory response to the policy issues being presented to council at the time, and ought not be perceived as being some flaw in the system. It is precisely the system, and I think that's an important distinction to be made.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
Just to finalize, I do understand what Kate and Herb, I believe, were suggesting about going ahead and doing 2023 and allowing council to look at the number of allotments for 2024, which it may or may not want to reduce full 4 number.
Yeah.
But that does, I believe, have to be done in a different process.
I'd like to make a motion. I'd like to make a motion approving all 4 resolutions, affirming and approving one-time increases on 210 West Francis, 212 West Francis, 931 West Francis, and 521 McSkimming.
Seconded.
We have,
That wasn't clear to me.
he wants to do it from 2023, 4 additional allotments from added to 2023 allotments.
That was the specific language staff provided.
So, we have a motion and a second. Further discussion? like I said, I just don't think that this is the meeting where I would do this. I would love to handle these individually. I would love to talk more about the individual applicants, but I am not gonna vote yes on the motion that is on the floor now. We have
Call the vote.
Sorry?
Call the vote.
I am. We have a motion and a second. Could we have a roll call vote? This is for all four resolutions of Resolution 97, 98, 99, and 100.
Counselor Doyle,
No.
Counselor Guth,
Yes.
Counselor Howenstein,
No.
Counselor Rose,
Yes.
Mayor Tory.
Nope.
A question, and this gets into what I said, the intent wasn't something that should be considered, but the Tobin residences on 210 and 212 West Francis sounds as though they're going to be sold. And so I'm assuming that if they are going to be sold, there are no building plans at this point. And I'm wondering if the owners of 210 and 212 would consider accepting future allotments in 2024.
When you say accepting future allotments in 2024, what?
Multi-year allotments for 2024 for 210 and 212 West Francis.
What that means, though, is that they don't get activated in 2024. They would be borrowed from 2024. They could be activated now. They would be
Correct.
valid now.
Correct, that is correct. They're just borrowing the allotment from 2024. You can still act on it.
Yes.
So, and Jim is suggesting not to do that because it treats these differently. I don't know that it has any meaning at the end of the day, but it's just another way to skin the cat. But they would be activated now. They would not be valid January 1. They would be valid now. It's borrowing from the future.
Is that what you were trying to accomplish, assuming that it couldn't be acted on until January 1st?
My assumption was that nothing would really happen until the properties were sold.
I don't know whether that's accurate or not. I am having trouble with trying to create a distinction between the four applications here.
I think that, I mean, functionally, the question before you, I mean, to the extent that maybe four of you are willing to grant some relief to these people, the question becomes, do you then reduce the 24 allotments or not? So we're not talking about giving them a 24 allotment. We're talking about giving them a 23 allotment and whether or not you reduce 24. Just to,
And Mr.
that's
Finance,
the framework we're working on.
from what you said previously, I thought you indicated that it was not within the council's power to reduce future allotments.
That's our legal position is that
Unless we
there
do
was,
it for them. In which case, it's okay.
no, our legal position is that there was no authority to call these allotments multi-year allotments unless they went through a multi-year process. But you have discretion to issue additional allotments. And we're not going to challenge whether or not you take them from 2024 or not. That's not our fight.
Ward, to your specific question, there are no controls in a demolition allotment that would dictate when the allotment could be used, right? When the receipt of the allotment could result in the demolition of a building. They could sit on the allotment for 3 years, which is the vesting provided to a land use approval by state statute. So there isn't a correlation between the year an allotment's granted and when a building could be demolished.
Mr. Supino, in your experience, what is the length of time generally between the issuance of a demolition permit and actual action on the property?
It varies widely depending upon people's objectives with the property, the condition of the property, the location, et cetera. I wouldn't be comfortable speculating on that.
Some
Or does
would be.
Or as a practical matter, it takes a while to prepare plans, takes a while to get through the building process. I mean, if somebody got the green light today, if they were asking me, I'd tell them, you're probably not gonna be ready to demolish for, at least 18 months, maybe 2 years.
There is another way to skin this cat, I suppose. You could grant these 4 applicants the 2024 allotments, the multi-year allotments, and then discuss whether you want to increase that number in the future. It's kind of the opposite of what you were proposing a second ago, but, it moves it along. So.
If I may, for the sake of moving forward, I'd feel comfortable doing the 2024 allotments where I feel like there is a majority of that, and just with the comment that I suspect we'll be back at this table talking about the same issue for different demolition permits next year, but I'd like to make a motion, if that's all right.
I would love you to make a motion.
All right. I don't know if I need to do one specific, or I'd just like to make a motion to allow the resolutions 97, 98, 99, and 100 to be given 2024 multi-year allotments.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All right. Could we have a roll call vote for 100, 99, 98, and 97, please?
Counselor Doyle?
Yes.
Counselor Guth?
Yes.
Counselor Howenstein?
Yes.
Counselor Rose?
Yes.
Mayor Tory?
No. Thank you guys so much. Yeah. Have a great day.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, you had continued the executive session to after the.
Item on our agenda.
I was going to get to it. You continue the executive session until after the action items. If you move the executive session now, you could go downstairs and perhaps we could talk while you took a dinner break about do the executive session while you're doing a dinner break, and then return here to discuss the last item.
I'd love to just do the last item right now.
Okay. That works too.
Get her done, baby.
Hopefully it doesn't take long.
Amen.
Take action.
Gross. All right, thank you, guys. We have one more item that we need to take care of.
Well, most humans like to think we're working in the honor system now, right? That's what it was based on. We didn't know that somebody was going to game the system.
All right, this is resolution number 90 under action items. This is the review and approval of the resolution. We've been over this, and we left our last meeting with agreement and acceptance on it, and Bill had, I think, 3 items of perhaps language change that he was interested in. And so we're going to go over each of those real quickly. And then we'll touch back on if there's any others. So, Bill, will you direct us to the first one?
Sure. Section 2, affordable housing. The end of the first sentence immediately following the title, affordable housing, I would like to add the following. So this continues after maintenance of affordable housing, and I would like to add the following words: for our workforce and any applicable qualifying household members.
Can everybody get that? Do you need to write it down? Do you want him to repeat it? Will you please repeat it?
I'm happy to repeat it. So the sentence that ends in maintenance of affordable housing would be appended with for our workforce and any applicable qualifying household members.
So you guys, I don't want to support that. I find that language to be limiting and inappropriate for where our affordable housing program is and has been. I am concerned about that kind of value or ethic being the driver behind our affordable housing efforts that we are going to be making over the next 2 years. It doesn't take into account people that aren't in a household, but they on themselves are either, suffering from disability or are retirees that have worked in our community for decades. I understand where Bill is trying to steer this. Well, no, I don't. I shouldn't say that. I don't know where Bill is trying to steer this, but my concern here is about a community-based housing program that doesn't put such a price tag on saying you're either a worker who wants to live in a studio or a one bedroom and you show up to work, or you are out of here. The next step from that to me sounds like prioritization of different job types. This is some of the same speak that we've heard from anti-housing advocates. This is the same speak that we've heard from people most recently that under the guise of making our program better really do not intend to make it better. So I personally, Bill, if you want to rework that language into something that as I suggested was an and, then I'd be more likely to support it. But at this time, I don't find your amendments to this language to be helpful to our goals for the next 2 years.
Okay, thank you. To be clear, I didn't say any of the things that you said. My intention, which you said you did not understand, I'm happy to explain, is to prioritize the greatest need for our community at the moment. And I believe that is for our workforce and their applicable qualifying household members. That doesn't mean that I don't respect that there are retirees. It doesn't mean I have any interest in kicking anyone out. It doesn't mean that I'm only interested in studio units. So none of those things did I say. But I do think that the greatest need facing our community in our housing program right now is prioritizing the workforce. As everyone is constantly complaining about, there's nobody to hire to bus tables and work in the grocery stores, et cetera, et cetera. So that is my intention.
I make an amendment that might be more amenable to everyone of putting something like that under list item D, under affordable housing, and at the end of affordable housing, it says to better serve our community / workforce. Hope that's simple yet elegant. But
You're looking at item 2D. 2D?
Yeah, 2 delta. Yeah.
So at the end of maintenance of affordable housing,
To better serve our community / workforce. Without trying to make any distinction, because there's a lot of overlap between community and workforce, and
Yeah.
a lot of overlap between. what
instead
the
of a
housing
slash,
for.
I'd put an and in there, and I would be amenable.
Okay, then I don't want to take away from what you were trying to get at, but I'm just trying to get
Appreciate
the
it.
word workforce in here, because I feel like it is a
So
big
affordable
deal.
housing 2.
Where do Ward and John stand on these semantic changes?
Well, I don't like getting into wordsmithing in general. I agree that the whole affordable housing program, I always refer to it as workforce housing. I think that the APSHA guidelines assure that people that are qualifying for this housing have workforce qualifications. I think it does no harm and perhaps increases understanding just to put workforce in there somewhere. But really, it's never been about subsidizing housing for people that are not members of the workforce. There's always been a work element involved in it. So I'm not sure that it's necessary, but I think that it does clarify that it's for workforce. I mean, you look at the APSHA guidelines, you have 1,500 hours a year you're supposed to work. So there's always been that requirement.
And that's where that requirement should sit, is in APSHA guidelines. I would refer to the AACP and how it describes our community housing, our affordable housing program. It recognizes both community and workforce. It is not, so I appreciate a language change there. That is, from what I see, I would more support that.
Yeah, and I think that we get community through the families of the workforce. So we get both, whether you call it affordable housing or workforce housing, you get community because members of the workforce have families and are rooted in the community.
Yeah.
So it's just semantics. Like I said, I don't like getting into wordsmithing.
Yeah. John, any comments?
Yeah, as I said the last time we talked about this, I'm perfectly happy leaving wordsmithing these ordinances and so on to our legal department because that's what they do and they're very good at it. I would support Sam's changes if will help us get to the end of this meeting.
All right. Bill, what was the second one?
To be clear, I'll support Sam's change also.
Thank you.
Proposed change. Thank you. Section 3, community building and health, adding a new bullet point F that says developing policies and/or regulations that incentivize and promote desirable uses in our community's commercial spaces.
One more time. Policies.
Developing policies and/or regulations that incentivize and promote desirable uses in our community's commercial spaces. And happy to I think I've talked with all of you about what I'm thinking there, but how do we get affordable food and beverage? How do we get the types of uses in our commercial spaces in town versus the ones that we see as less desirable?
Okay. Appreciate that. Any comments, council members? John?
I guess I just have ask ComDev what they thought of that language.
Happy to participate.
As you're coming up, Philip, I would say that for me, the hinge point here is definition of desirable.
Right, well, it'd be up to discussion, of course. I think it leaves it open for discussion.
I think Bill's point is the right one. I mean, there's, in all these council goals, there's plenty of space for staff and council to work together to come to some working definition of what we mean by this language. The only question that I would have in response to Bill's suggestion is, it sounds focused on incentivization, and is that leaving other tools on the table for council? I don't have, staff doesn't have a view one way or another on the right way to approach that topic. But when I hear the desired outcome, more affordable food and beverage and entertainment options for the community, there's certainly a strong nexus there with existing AACP policies around some of those issues. And from a sort of planning professional standpoint, is incentivization and promotion, are those all the tools in the toolbox? But that's a question for council to unpack, not staff.
Yeah, I did not intend to limit what tools might be out there. I personally have a philosophy that carrots work better than sticks, but I'm willing to explore any tools.
Yeah, I think that these are goals, and when we get down to the brass tacks of actually having resolutions, ordinances, is where we have discussions about what desirable is. So I have, I'll support that addition.
Great.
I'll be the third to support it.
Okay. I'm gonna need the exact language again.
Sure, and I can send you this, I may have already, but what I wrote was developing policies and/or regulations that incentivize and promote desirable uses in our community's commercial spaces.
How we do that is that's the question.
These are goals.
Right. Okay, and then within section 4, customer-focused government, the second sentence currently reads, the city of Aspen will continuously improve services and process with our customers in mind. I would like to slightly tweak that to say the city of Aspen will continuously improve customer service and processes with our customers in mind. And then add a bullet point. I put it between what was B and C, so this would be a new C, but it could go anywhere. And that would read, developing policies and/or regulations to ensure the review of land use and permitting applications is administered in reasonable, fair, and appropriate periods of time.
That one's tough. Reasonable and fair, et cetera. I understand your intention here.
Again, intentionally leaving it open for council and staff collaboration.
Yeah, I think we've been working on that for a couple of years, and I think that we're making some progress on it. Can we do these one at a time?
I was gonna make a motion with all of them included.
Mr. Mayor, I have it.
Yeah.
Cool.
Oh, great, thank you. Okay, Bill, under customer-focused government, the city of Aspen will continuously improve. This says services, and you want to change the word services to customer service.
Correct.
So, do you want an S on the end of services?
Doesn't really matter to me. The important word, and I know it's redundant.
Well, there's two different things. Our services are one thing. Customer service is another thing. So this is saying about our services continually improve. And in your language, it's our customer service will continually improve. So it is small, but they are different.
Yeah, okay, so in that case, I might even say continuously improve customer service, comma, services and processes with our customers in mind.
Bill, for me, the customer has a connotation of our visitors, our visitor base. Our citizens are who we're really focused on. Community members are citizens instead of customers. So I understand that I think what you're saying is that the customers are the people that come to government for these services and processes, and what I'm suggesting is the citizens of Aspen that come to ask for services and processes.
Yeah, I wasn't really making that distinction, Ward. The way that I'm looking at it is that anyone who's sort of interacting with and or receiving services from the city of Aspen, and that may be someone who, lives across the street from the city limit border, but is a customer of Aspen Water Utility, for example. It may be somebody who owns a second home in Aspen. It may be a one-time visitor to Aspen. It may be someone who's lived in Aspen for 50 years. So I think for me, it's all encompassing.
It come up next. Doesn't matter to me, I guess.
Okay. Thank you. Sarah, if you have the opportunity to share those back to us, and I'll make them.
I don't know what you just decided or didn't decide.
On the last one would be,
not
the
sure I
city of
do either.
Aspen will continuously improve customer service, comma, services and process with our customers in mind.
Process or processes, I think processes might be the correct.
Yeah, I just hate that word.
We could say processes if it sounds
I
better,
do
too.
actually, yes, because I kind of like that. It's, it's got like a tinge of English to it.
And then again, on C, I don't know if John or Ward mentioned that this is something that's been working, that staff has been working on and council has been working on. I acknowledge that, but I think codifying it would be my ultimate goal to make sure that it is long-lasting.
Well, it's not really codifying, it's a goal.
No, he's saying he wants to get to
Towards
codifying it.
That's why I'm adding that in here.
Amending the land use code to simplify processes and improve coordination between agencies. And how do you say it? And I mean, maybe actually it's only just about adding a word like timeline.
Do you want me to read this again, how I wrote it? And I'm open
Yeah,
to
yeah,
suggestions, but a separate bullet point that says developing policies and/or regulations to ensure the review of land use and permitting applications is administered in reasonable, fair, and appropriate periods of time.
That leaves a lot of interpretation and wiggle room.
Yes.
Happy with it. It's similar to 3B, which is more on the commercial side, but that one sort of just says the same thing, I feel like, towards the residential side.
All right, well, we'll try it out. We'll go to a motion with it. Sarah, my suggestion here is to make that language that he just shared with us item D and move item D that's in here to an item E.
I have no objection to that.
Let me know when you're ready for a motion.
One you just read had an is in it. Shouldn't it be R?
No, it's to ensure the review is.
To ensure the review.
Everything after the of is
To
qualified.
ensure the, okay, you're right. Never mind.
Yeah, well, I won't claim to be the expert on grammar.
Grammarly. Pro.
Ready for a motion?
I think Sarah's gonna share the language so that we, so that you, in your motion, will say that.
With the new language added.
Correct.
So is this text, the subscripts, or those are just voice recognition that is? Wow.
Doesn't really pick up very much.
It goes O.
We're at that point of the meeting, we say, see who's watching, or.
Getting loopy.
Food, give me food.
Big rap.
Got it. Sam, read the screen. Not word for word, I just mean,
Just,
watch.
I make a motion to pass resolution 90 with the changes made this evening.
Thank you.
No?
With amendments.
As amended?
As amended to the resolution.
Okay.
I haven't been following all the amendments. Is it clear what the amendments are? Are
Well, I don't,
they
not
as
to
written?
me. I don't believe the amendments are clear to staff. I've attempted to track them. That's it. If it's in green, it's something I believe that was proposed as an amendment by more than one person, or supported by more than one person.
2D is what you said, right?
I do think it's appropriate to go through and make sure everything's clear.
Yeah, I said to better serve. Yeah, that one I actually wrote down, so it's better serve.
He did have housing to better serve the community and workforce.
Yep. To better serve.
Could you give me the section and number?
Right where you have the green instead of.
Section 2, letter D, right there. Yep, forward change to housing.
To better serve our community and workforce. the community and the
Thank you.
workforce, same difference.
Thank you. And then,
3F,
that reflects it.
and then 4, improve.
Improve customer services and process with our customers in mind. That's correct. Developing policies and regulations to ensure the review of land use and permitting applications is administered in reasonable, fair, and appropriate periods of time.
Great.
Acceptable.
So,
Thank you so much. Yes, so you would make a motion
I make a motion to approve resolution number 90 with the
As amended.
as amended.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Thank you guys so much. Could we have a roll call vote for, what is it, resolution 90?
90.
Counselor Doyle,
Yes.
Counselor Guth,
Yes.
Counselor Howenstein,
Yes.
Counselor Rose,
Yes.
Mayor Tory.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, the executive session was continued to this point of the meeting. For the record, I would note that we will convene an executive session downstairs. We will not return to these chambers to adjourn the meeting.
Do you need a motion to go back into executive session?
No.
Thank you.
No, I don't think so.
All right, with that, thank you guys so much. Thank you to Grassroots.
Thanks.